Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hey guys. You know, in that intro, I kind of recorded the intro video for this stream, or for the channel, I suppose, rather off the cuff, and I did it kind of stream of conscience, and I said in that video that I will make these commitments to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts, and if you stick with me, then you will see the world differently. And sometimes the receipts take you into places that you don't want to go. And that's just the reality of the situation. Sometimes when we are in a search for what the truth is, it takes us down paths that we're scared to walk down. It takes us to doors that we don't want to open. And it shows us information that we don't want to admit is real, because it goes against everything that we thought was true up until that point. And I think for quite a few people, the topic that we're going to talk about today on the stream is not really something that people want to see. I mean, I saw this very clearly yesterday. What we're going to discuss today on the stream is not the answer that people want. It's not the answer that any of us want. It's not the answer that I want. Do you guys understand how much I idolize James O'Keefe and the work he did with Project Veritas, going back to the Andrew Breitbart days? Do you guys understand that what I'm doing in terms of infiltrating the schools and getting into these woke training events and showing you what's really going on? Do you guys understand that was like inspired by James O'Keefe and Andrew Breitbart, that I thought constantly about Andrew Breitbart and James O'Keefe when I was writing my book, Actively Unwoke. Like, that's the reality. So I don't want this to be true. That James O'Keefe is a narcissist who is running a smear campaign on Project Veritas. I don't want that to be true. I never wanted that to be true. But I just can't deny it anymore. Based on, first of all, I knew this yesterday. And I talked about it, like the stream I did last night about where we watched James O'Keefe's private Twitter space. And I streamed it. And that's when I really started coming to the realization of what was going on, was hearing him on that private Twitter space. And then watching him on Tim Pool last night. If you watch that stream or were live, you saw me coming to the realization of what was going on quite literally in real time. And it wasn't the answer that I wanted to land on, but that doesn't mean it's not the correct answer. And so last night, after the stream, I put out this thread on Twitter. And this is one of the things we're going to walk through today. And this is basically a thread walking through the publicly available receipts that we have and have had since February when all of this started. And we're going to walk through this today. So I put this thread out on Twitter last night. And I also responded to Project Veritas's tweet about the defamatory narratives spread by James O'Keefe. And I said exactly what I said on the stream yesterday, which is that if you actually read the lawsuit is very, very clear. James broke his employment agreement, and that's what the lawsuit is about, and I stand by that. And then I posted the thread on there as well. And the responses I got on that thing, I understand that a lot of people don't want to hear this information. I really do. But it's ugly, guys. It's ugly. So, after I wrote this thread, you guys know, like, I'm friendly with a few people at Project Veritas because they're like, I've taught a couple of them like how to speak socialist, for lack of a better term, or have given them tips and tricks here and there for like when they're going and infiltrating these different groups. Like I've taught them, like, you know, about the language and all this stuff. And I hope that that we're going to be able to, you know, take some of the information that I have about the schools and what's going on where and make something of that. So I am friendly with some people at Project Veritas, and I have been for a while. But I want to be very clear. I have never been on the payroll of Project Veritas. I have never made 1 cent from Project Veritas. Okay. Like, I am very much an outsider. They do their thing. They are their own organization. And that's really the extent of it. I've talked to them here or there. Well, I have talked to over half a dozen people that currently work at Project Veritas since this morning, since they saw this thread. And do you know what they've all said? And these are people that some of you guys would know. Like, these are people who are publicly associated with Project Veritas. Like, if you go on their Twitter profile, they have Project Veritas in it. They have there's some reporters, there are some people behind the scenes, there are some, like, there are people at all different levels of the organization with all different levels of involvement in this situation. And I've spoken to over half a dozen of them in the past, 12 hours. And every single one of them says exactly the same thing, that what I wrote in this thread was the truth. And they were actually surprised. There were some of them that were like, I'm really surprised that you deduced what was going on based on the public information. But it's the truth. And even beyond that, it's worse than you even understand. It's worse than I understood. It's worse than it is worse than the information that has been released. First of all, James has done more things than they have released publicly. Now, those things are all going to come out. Every single thing that I'm going to talk about on this stream is going to be confirmed and will come out, I think, in the course of the lawsuit. But they can't put it out right now because putting out the information right now would jeopardize the organization. But every single thing that that Project Veritas has put out and that I'm going to tell you will come out in the course of this lawsuit. You can take this to the bank. It will come out in the course of this lawsuit. Of course, no one will apologize to me. I will never give my I told you so. Okay, I'll take my I told you so once the information comes out. James has done some truly horrid things. James was putting himself up in suites in luxury hotel rooms all over the place on Project Veritas's dime. James was going out to eat in these fancy restaurants all on Project Veritas's dime. He was traveling around to things that had nothing to do with raising money, as he keeps saying, like, all I was doing was to raise money. It was to raise money. It was to raise money. It wasn't all to raise money. Some of it was to raise money, but not all of it. James once told a woman working for Project Veritas that if you get pregnant, you're going to get fired because the pregnancy would have gotten in the way of raising more money. Recently, a member of someone that was affiliated with Project Veritas died. And when they called James to tell James this person has died, James glossed over that and made the entire phone call about him. And I can go on and on and on and on and on with the things that I have heard today from various people. And again, every single thing that I'm telling you is going to come out in the course of this lawsuit. So you don't have to believe me, because every single thing I'm talking about is going to come out in the course of this lawsuit. And sadly, they can't speak out until then, which is going to take months. But the reality is already out there for anyone who is willing to look at the receipts. And we will walk through the receipts today. And I'm going to tell you more. There are conservative influencers like Viva Fry. I had already blocked him on Twitter a long time ago. I blocked him after the Eliza Blue thing. I was really disappointed in that. There are influencers that know what's going on, that are still shilling for James publicly for clout. Steve Bannon told Project Veritas, I shit you not, Steve Bannon told Project Veritas that it was Project Veritas's job to cover up for all of James O'Keefe's misgivings. And Steve Bannon didn't care if James O'Keefe was doing things with kids. He didn't care at all. It was Project Veritas's job to cover up for everything that James O'Keefe was doing, because James O'Keefe is just too damn important. Those are your conservative influencers, guys. Viva Frey, in this tweet, is overtly misleading his audience. Overtly misleading his audience about what's going on. And we're going to talk about that. Do you know another thing that's overtly misleading people? Do you guys know how last night on Timcast, there was the big breaking news on Timcast, that the executive director of Project Veritas had resigned. And everyone is saying that the executive director of Project Veritas resigned because they're suing James O'Keefe because of this lawsuit. And what they're doing is they're making it seem as though the executive director of Project Veritas resigned yesterday. He didn't resign yesterday. And Tim Pool knew that based on the date stamps on the email that he read last night on his show, but didn't show last night on his show. The executive director of Project Veritas did not resign yesterday, and he did not resign because of the lawsuit. He resigned last week because they are fundamentally restructuring the organization because of all the bullshit that James put them through. So they're changing a lot of the ways the organization is run. And the executive director just didn't think that there was a fit anymore. But it had nothing to do with suing James O'Keefe. And it didn't even happen yesterday. It happened last week. And the person who leaked the email to Tim Pool is a former Project Veritas whistleblower that is shilling for James O'Keefe. Even though that person knows what's going on. This is all so dirty on so many different levels. And no one is telling the truth. I have been getting text messages all morning from influential conservatives that you guys have heard of that will not speak publicly about this, but that are texting me privately and saying, "You would not believe the stories I have on James O'Keefe." But they won't say them publicly because it would jeopardize their status and their clout and their clicks and all of this stuff. It's dirty. It's really, really dirty. And I am so sorry, guys. I really am. I am sorry that this is the reality. I am sorry that this is the situation that we find ourselves in. I didn't want this to be the case. But it is true. James O'Keefe has been the aggressor in this situation with Project Veritas from the very beginning, when they removed him, or they didn't remove him, they suspended him from his role. He got pissed off. And this was after they had uncovered egregious conduct. And it was after many employees had complained about his conduct and the impact it had in the organization. And we're going to review some of those complaints today. And every single thing that the employees said all lines up with James O'Keefe being a narcissist. And so James O'Keefe was removed from his decision-making position at Project Veritas because he tried to fire senior executives at Project Veritas who had uncovered his egregious financial misdeeds within the organization. And James didn't want to pay the organization back, and he didn't want that information to be exposed. So instead, He obfuscated the approved process, went around the board of directors to try to fire the CFO instead of actually, you know, rectifying the fact that he spent a metric ton of the organization's money that he shouldn't have spent on things that were not related to the organization's business. And then the board removed him from that decision-making position, and James O'Keefe leaked it out to the media. And that's when this all took off. James O'Keefe has been the aggressor on this since the beginning because they took James O'Keefe out of control. And we're going to talk about it. So that's the majority of what we're going to do on the show, guys. And again, I'm really sorry. I cannot even begin to express how sorry I am that this is the answer. This is not what I wanted. I've said it from the very beginning. Like, I didn't think that Project Veritas handled the situation well from the beginning. And by the way, there are people inside of Project Veritas who also don't think the situation was handled well from the beginning. I'm not the only one that had that perspective. But two things can be true at once. Could have mismanaged that situation from the beginning, and James O'Keefe can also be a narcissist who is running a smear campaign against Project Veritas because he's pissed off that he got taken out of control. Those two things can be true. So let's walk through it. So I started to have this realization last night when we were watching James O'Keefe in his Twitter space, which, by the way, if you didn't see that Twitter space, I basically subscribed to James O'Keefe's Twitter so I could get access to his Twitter space so I could stream it. And you can watch the stream from last night. That Twitter space was like a narcissist gathering fuel. It was like that Twitter space, which was supposed to be James O'Keefe's real talk about the lawsuit, was essentially James O'Keefe's simps kissing James O'Keefe's ass for half an hour before he went on Timcast. It was, James, you are so amazing. And James, you are so brave. And James, you are so incredible. And I can't believe you picked me to speak in this Twitter space, James. Oh my, what an honor to talk to you, James. And James is like, yes, I know. I am great. I am wonderful. I am awesome. Give me money. Here are all the ways in which you could give me money. It was one of the most narcissist things I've ever witnessed in my life, honestly. And then we went from that into Timcast. And when James O'Keefe was on Timcast, he overtly lied. He lied about the timeline. And so that is when I started to get tipped off about this. Nope, Bonnie, this is not correct. This is not correct at all. Bonnie is making shit up. And guys, just so you know, I will be calling out people throughout this stream who are just overtly making things up because they are desperate for James to be innocent. Bonnie, this is making shit up. James overtly broke his employment agreement with Project Veritas. This is not in dispute. All of this is going to be come out in copious evidence in the course of the lawsuit. This is not correct. Do not gaslight my audience. Don't make shit up on my channel just because your fifis are getting hurt. So, yes, you are literally just making shit up. You are making shit up. You are crying in my chat. You are trying to gaslight people. I'm not going to allow it, Bonnie. Not today. And you can take a little time out and you can think about that because I don't want to have to pay attention to monitoring your chat while I'm reading this. Not messing around, guys. Not messing around. Facts don't care about your feelings, conservatives. So, here's what I wrote last night right after I saw James O'Keefe overtly lie on Tim Pool. And I'm reading my own stuff because, like, I want to make sure that I get this, how I'm explaining it. I want to make sure I'm getting it correct. Okay. And I was like actually referencing things when I was writing this stuff. And so I know that this is correct. And I want to make sure I'm not doing it off the cuff, off the top of my head like I normally do. Last night on Tim Pool, James O'Keefe said that he was fired by Project Veritas on February 10th. It is overtly not true that James O'Keefe was fired by Project Veritas on February 10th. That is an overt lie. That is rewriting history. One of the things that narcissists do is they rewrite history to go along with whatever story they want told that is going to make them look incredible and amazing and perfect, or alternatively, as a complete victim, which is what James O'Keefe is trying to make himself look like right now. Whatever is going to help them in anything that they need to do, that's what they're going to do. So James O'Keefe overtly live on Tim Pool rewrote history to say that he was fired on February 10th. That wasn't true. And we knew it wasn't true because on February 15th, Project Veritas released a statement saying James had not been removed from the organization. And you can still see this statement on Twitter. It's right there. A few weeks ago, a number of our staff members provided leadership with some verbal feedback describing real management concerns regarding the treatment of people and our internal processes. This prompted the board to solicit feedback from additional staff members, and that internal letter was leaked. I wonder who leaked it. The narrative that is being portrayed by referencing this letter is patently false. James has not been removed from Project Veritas. That was on February 15th, okay? Then James created his new organization, OMG Media, on February 17th. That is according to the lawsuit that Project Veritas filed yesterday. And we're going to look at some snippets from that lawsuit in a second. The moment that James created his new media organization is the moment that he broke his employment contract, because he was still employed by Project Veritas. Not only was he employed by Project Veritas, he was also on the board of directors of Project Veritas. James can go and say, they fired me, they fired me, they fired me. Although in the course of this video, you're going to see that James's story has changed on that. He has gone back and forth and up and down and sideways, and I'm going to demonstrate that. But he wasn't fired. He didn't get fired until May 15th. And so the moment that he created his new organization on February 17th, he violated his employee agreement with Project Veritas. Then on February 20th, James released a video. You guys might remember it. We're going to watch it today. We're going to watch this video again, because I want you to watch this video again with the information that we're going to talk about today, because it's going to change how you saw this video. I watched this video last night and I saw it completely differently than I did when we watched it back in February. But this video came out on February 20th. Again, James said he was fired on February 10th. On February 15th, Project Veritas released a statement saying James had not been removed. On February 17th, James started his new organization. And on February 20th, remember, this is supposedly after James says he had been fired. 10 days later, he released a video basically saying that he was still at Project Veritas, but that he was really serious and he was going to leave now, bro. And he had given Project Veritas this ultimatum that if Project Veritas didn't fire the entire board and everyone who had come against him, that he was just going to walk away. Well, why would James O'Keefe be saying that he was going to walk away on February 20th when, according to what he said on Tim Pool last night, he had already been fired on February 10th? That makes no sense. That doesn't add up. All you need to see that is a calendar, guys. We all saw this play out in public. No, James did not think he was fired. Because if James thought he was fired, he wouldn't have made the video on February 20th saying, unless the entire board resigns, I'm going to walk away. James in no way, shape, or form thought he was fired. The evidence that James presented in that video overtly says that he is not fired. Let's walk through that. There is no universe in which James was mistaken about this. In fact, I'm going to show you that James himself tried to, be a little fuzzy with the details of what happened in the board meeting in that video that he released on February 20th to make it seem like something it wasn't. Let's actually jump into that. Let's go into this thread right here. Let me set up the sound because we've got a couple video clips. Yeah. Benjamin says, I've been fired before. Do you know what they don't do when you're fired? They don't let you come back into the employee sections of the building 10 days later to give a speech to the staff and film it and put it out on the internet. That doesn't happen. You wouldn't have free access if you had been fired. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So let's listen. So this is James O'Keefe last night saying on Timcast that he was fired on February 10th, and there's no mistaking what he said.
February 10th. But like, are you still on contract with Veritas? No, I was fired on February 10th. But like, are you still on contract with Veritas? No, I was fired on February 10th. But like, are you still on contract with Veritas? No, I was fired on February 10th. But like, are you still on contract with Veritas? No, I was fired on February 10th.
Okay. I think that's pretty clear. James claimed last night on Tim Pool that he was fired on February 10th. The problem is that James was not fired on February 10th. He was also not removed from the board on February 10th. And we know that based on the board meeting minutes that James himself provided. On February 10th, James was indefinitely suspended pending the results of the audit. This is a screenshot that was released in that February 20th video that James put out 10 days after he said he was fired. He released these meeting notes. This is from the board meeting on February 10th. Excuse me. This is from the board meeting on February 10th. It says the board voted to approve, and look at the part that James has highlighted. The highlight there is James. He says the board approved the indefinite suspension of Mr. O'Keefe as CEO, and then it says without compensation. But do you know what part James doesn't highlight? Pending the results of the two-dimensional audit. James purposefully leaves that out. And for everyone saying, well, if he was indefinitely suspended without compensation, that is the same thing as being fired. And he didn't have a date. He was indefinitely suspended. He was suspended for all time. No, he wasn't. They were, because of James's massive spending, because James never paid for anything out of his own pocket. James was flying around first class everywhere. James was taking private flights everywhere. James was going and getting luxury suites at hotels on the donor's dime. James was going out to all sorts of fancy high-priced dinners. And sometimes when you're raising money, that stuff is necessary, but a lot of times it's not. And so because of James's massive spending, they were conducting an audit to get a sense of what had actually gone on. James was suspended pending the results of the audit, which you can clearly see in the board meeting minutes. It also says that Project Veritas offered to provide James O'Keefe with mental wellness care, treatment, and counseling with the sincere hope and goal of James O'Keefe returning to the organization. They wanted to fix the problem and to continue to have James in the organization with safeguards in place to make sure that James was not abusing staff, and also that James was not massively spending the donors' dollars on things that were luxuries that were just for him to enjoy, that were not a part of doing his job with the organization. James O'Keefe shared these meeting minutes. That's how these are public. Hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. I don't know exactly. It's going to come out in the course of the lawsuit, but a lot of money. A lot. That's not all. Listen to James talk about this here. This is a clip from the February 20th video. And remember, when James filmed this, this was after February 10th. We have just seen James say on Tim Pool he was fired on February 10th. This video was released on February 20th. Let's listen to James talk about this, because he's going to waffle back and forth between saying, I was removed, I was suspended, but he is not consistent in his messaging. And he also, when he talks about being removed as the CEO, he leaves out the part about it being pending the results of the audit. Let's listen.
Have a paycheck? On February 10th, you guys don't know what I'm about to tell you. Another board meeting occurred. Again, I'm gone. With the meeting's minutes reflecting that they had indefinitely suspended me from the board. By this time, they had stripped me of all of my authority as CEO. During the time I was on leave, they kicked me off the board.
That's not true.
So I can't be a CEO if I have no authority. I can't make any decisions. I'm not allowed to access any donor names. I wasn't even sure what my job was, or if I even had a job. Right now, I actually don't.
Lie.
I'm not sure what my job here is. In the board minutes, it says that I no longer have a paycheck and I'm indefinitely suspended from this organization.
So listen to what James just said. I don't have a paycheck and I'm indefinitely suspended. That's not what the board did. The board suspended him pending the results of the audit into his malfeasance. And when James said he was removed from the board, he also lied about that. You guys heard him say in this video, they removed me from the board. They removed me from the board. Let's just listen again.
On February 10th, you guys don't know what I'm about to tell you. Another board meeting occurred. Again, I'm gone. With the meeting's minutes reflecting that they had indefinitely suspended me from the board. By this time, they had stripped me of all of my authority as CEO. During the time I was on leave, they kicked me off the board.
No.
So I can't.
That didn't happen. Did you see what James did? He said, they indefinitely suspended me from the board. Well, they did indefinitely suspend him, but just as in the CEO position, he was, and he cut this off in the video, he was suspended pending the results of the audit. But did you notice in that video, James went back and forth. He said, they suspended me from the board. And then he said, they removed me from the board. They never removed him from the board. That is a lie. That is not the truth. That is not even backed up by the evidence that James himself presented. It is a complete rewrite of history. It clearly says, and again, these are, and all these notes are available on Timcast News, guys. Like, they all reported it at the time. Indefinite suspension of Mr. O'Keefe, and look what he cut off. Pending the results of the two-dimensional audit. Again, that is the audit of his own malfeasance. Again, back on February 20th, James continues to double down on this lie that he has been removed, suspended pending the results of an audit. Is not removed. It is not fired. And James doesn't mention the audit part, which he's leaving out because it's convenient.
Remove me from the board. 5 days later, after that, on February 15th, a statement was put out by this organization, by this organization's executive director, saying, quote, James has not been removed from Project Veritas. 5 days after they removed me from Project Veritas. James is the hardest working person I've ever.
They did not remove James from Project Veritas. I think we've established this. But when you have narcissists, it's important to call them on their bullshit. James just said 5 days after they removed me from everything, they didn't remove him. That is fantasy.
Met. Those who know him know he will not take time off unless forced to. Absent from the statement was the actions of the board to remove me from the board and remove me as CEO. I don't know why they omitted that part. Later on the 15th, the same day, while hiking with Kennedy, Peavy put a statement by quote tweeting a picture of me with him saying, there is nothing better than enjoying a well-deserved vacation. That tweet failed to mention that by then I had been removed from the board and indefinitely suspended as CEO.
He had not been removed from the board, and he had been suspended as CEO pending the results of the audit, which James continues to leave out of his statements, but he had not been removed from the board.
Why didn't they put that part in?
They didn't put it in, James, because it wasn't true. So listen to what he says. Let's just watch this last part again, because this is what James does. He lies about what has happened to make himself be the victim, to paint Project Veritas like these evil people that are just trying to screw him out of his own company. He lies about what's happened, and then he goes, I don't know why Project Veritas would do such a thing. It's because they didn't do it. You made it up, James.
While hiking with Kennedy, Peavy put a statement by quote tweeting a picture of me with him saying, there is nothing better than enjoying a well-deserved vacation. That tweet failed to mention that by then I had been removed from the board and indefinitely suspended as CEO. Why didn't they put that part in?
Because it wasn't real. Marriott says it looks like he's trying to cover his ass from the audit by smearing Project Veritas. That is absolutely correct. James knows exactly what this audit's going to turn up. He got caught. I'm sorry. He did. He knows exactly what it's going to turn up, and he already tried to cover his ass once by firing the CFO of the organization to begin with, and that didn't work because the board didn't let him do it. And then after James tried to fire the CFO without board approval, which is required, James tried to obfuscate the policies of his own organization to get out the CFO who had uncovered all of this malfeasance. And then the board says, no, James, you can't do that. And then James starts this whole smear campaign to cover his ass from the fact that Project Veritas was about to uncover all of his financial malfeasance. And he didn't want that to happen. And here's how we know how James is lying, as if we already didn't. By his own admission, he wrote a letter to the board demanding they step down on February 16th, or he would be forced to walk away. Really think about this, guys, and you're going to hear James say this. He wrote a letter to the board on February 16th demanding that the entire board resign, along with the leadership that had come against him in Project Veritas. And he demanded everyone resign, or else he was just going to have to leave. Well, if James O'Keefe had really been fired on February 10th, like he keeps saying he was, like he said last night on Tim Pool, then why on earth would he write a letter to the board on February 16th saying, if you all don't resign, I'm going to leave? Let's listen.
Series of events, After this series of events, I wrote a letter to the board on February 16th with the proposal. Many of you have not seen this, but this is what I sent to them, which I guess they haven't shared this with you, but I'm going to share it with you now. With a proposal that the board members resign by the end of this past week. We're now past that point, or I'll be forced to walk away. After this series of events, I wrote a letter to the board on February 16th with the proposal. Many of you have not seen this, but this is what I sent to them, which I guess they haven't shared this with you, but I'm going to share it with you now. With a proposal that the board members resign by the end of this past week. We're now past that point, or I'll be forced to walk away.
If he had
After this series of
if he had really been fired on February 10th, then there would have been no reason for him to write this letter, guys. No reason at all. Mark says, so it's true he was in fact still a full member of the board, even if suspended as CEO pending investigation results? Yes. James O'Keefe was still on the board of directors. He was also, by the way, still the CEO. He was just suspended from his decision-making responsibilities. It didn't mean he was fired. He was still employed by the organization, but it was pending the results of the audit that he had his decision-making capabilities basically removed. But he was absolutely still a member of the board. Well, then why didn't he say reinstated? Why didn't he say that? Why didn't he say that? Again, you guys are making stuff up based on what you want to be true rather than looking for what is true. In the lawsuit, Project Veritas explicitly states that James O'Keefe was not fired and they intended to reinstate him, which aligns with all of their public statements. And guys, if you think that Project Veritas is going to put dates in this lawsuit that they cannot verify with evidence, that is insane. And by the way, did you guys know that Project Veritas's lawyer is also Tim Pool's lawyer? Did you guys know that? So, conceivably last night when Tim had James on his show and let James lie and overtly snow his audience for 2 hours, and Tim was like, James, you are so great. How are you so great, James? James, how are you a modern priest of our time? James, I'm going to create a coffee in honor of you and give you all the profits. They have, Project Veritas and Tim Pool have the same fucking lawyer. Tim could have called the lawyer and tried to get some information before he let James O'Keefe snow his audience for 2 hours. But regardless of that fact, there is not a lawyer worth their salt that is going to put dates in a lawsuit that they cannot back up with evidence. So I'm going to make the base assumption that every single date that Project Veritas put in this lawsuit can be verified with evidence, because there's not a single lawyer that is going to write this lawsuit based on, I told you, bro, trust me, bro. In the lawsuit, Project Veritas explicitly states that James O'Keefe was not fired and they intended to reinstate him, which aligns with every single public statement that Project Veritas has made. He was not removed from the board until April, and he was not formally terminated from the company until May. And Project Veritas wouldn't be saying this in the lawsuit if they could not prove it. So you see here, the board did not terminate O'Keefe's employment, but rather intended to reinstate him with appropriate safeguards. They were trying to put policies and procedures in place to make sure that James could not egregiously spend the donor's money, berate employees, create a toxic working environment. They were trying to solve for all of this. O'Keefe was not formally removed from the board until April 24th, 2023. O'Keefe was not formally terminated from his employment until May 15th, 2023. And as a reminder, how can Project Veritas sue James for starting a new company? Because James started the company on February 17th while he was still a member of the board of Project Veritas, egregiously breaking his employment agreement. James then went and did an entire conservative media smear campaign against Project Veritas to promote his new competing organization while he was still a member of the board of Project Veritas. And guys, if you want to tell me how to run my stream, you will find yourself blocked very, very, very quickly. Goodbye, Alex. Have a nice life. Here's what is going on. James O'Keefe is a narcissist. Project Veritas employees documented multiple instances of outbursts caused by James's narcissism, which is what caused this whole thing in the first place. And we are going to look at the documentation of Project Veritas's employees when we're done reading this thread. Okay? But for right now, you're going to have to trust me because I want to get through the whole thread first, and then we will look at the receipts. Because I'm not going to say, trust me, bro, and then provide no receipts to back it up. We're going to look at the receipts. I just want to get through the whole thread first. When the board suspended James because he is a narcissist, he lost control. Now, losing control as a narcissist is like one of the worst possible things that you can do. If you take a narcissist out of control, they will do one of two things. They will either basically give you the worst version of the silent treatment that you've ever had in your life, or they will engage in like fury like you have never experienced before. And what James is doing and has been doing for months is James is pissed off that he got found out for egregiously spending Project Veritas's money, and he has been engaging in a massive smear campaign against Project Veritas to make himself look like the innocent victim so that he can raise money to start his new organization, which he is the only one that has control over, because he's never going to do this again. He's never going to give other people control over his stuff again because he's a narcissist. But he's engaging in a massive smear campaign to turn the public against Project Veritas because Project Veritas, in James's mind, committed the cardinal sin that you can, like the very worst thing that you can do to a narcissist, Project Veritas did to James O'Keefe. James started a campaign against the leadership of Project Veritas to make James O'Keefe look like the victim. And what I think he was doing was he was trying to build public pressure against Project Veritas to essentially get Project Veritas to cave and to give in to his demands so that he could regain control over Project Veritas, kick out anyone who went against him, and continue his extravagant spending of the donor dollar while using other people to do the journalism that he would eventually take credit for. And that is what he was doing when he sent that letter on February 16th demanding the entire board resign, or else he would just have to walk away. Well, according to James, they had already fired him. So why was he then demanding the board resign, or he was just going to walk away? Well, because they hadn't been fired yet. Now, James's efforts, as much public chaos as he created and built up against Project Veritas, overall, this effort failed because Project Veritas did not cave to James O'Keefe's demands. And I think that, quite frankly, I think James O'Keefe knew it would fail. I think that the reason that James O'Keefe did all of this stuff publicly is because he knew that he was out at Project Veritas. He knew what the audit was going to return. And that is why he created his new media group on February 17th. And again, this is in the Project Veritas lawsuit. And they would not put this date in the lawsuit if they could not back up this date with evidence. On February 17th, O'Keefe formed OMG. OMG notes on its website that it is located in the same town in which James O'Keefe lives and which Project Veritas is headquartered. He knew it would fail because he had officially created O'Keefe Media Group while he was on leave from Project Veritas, while he was still a member of the board of directors, while he was still the CEO, and this was in direct violation of the employment agreement that he had signed with Project Veritas. But here's another question I have. Why would he create this group if he intended to return to Project Veritas? Because that video and the video that we're going to watch, that came out on February 20th. That big speech of I am put upon and I am the poor victim of the world and everyone is so mean to me and I just want to do journalism and I don't know why everyone is so mean to me. That came out on February 20th. He had created his new media group on February 17th. Why would he have done that if he had any intention of returning? James knew his ultimatum wouldn't work. He never intended it to. He also knew he would never go back to work with people who he could not control. He staged his big recorded speech as a way to smear Project Veritas on his way out the door while also painting himself as the victim. 1 month later, 1 month after he created OMG and 1 month after all of this, James launched his website and then went on a full conservative media blitz. He went on Charlie Kirk. He went on Steve Bannon. He went on Russell Brand. He went on Megyn Kelly. He went on Mark Levin. He went on show after show after show after show after show. While he was still on the board of Project Veritas, smearing Project Veritas, lying about Project Veritas, saying that Project Veritas was bought and paid for by Pfizer, which there is no evidence of. Even Viva Frei was repeating this smear earlier today, saying they're bought and paid for by Pfizer. Where's the evidence? Viva, lawyer. Has anyone presented one piece of evidence, one single solitary piece of evidence that Project Veritas is bought and paid for by Pfizer? Because it doesn't exist. It does not exist at all. This was a smear campaign perpetrated by James because he got control taken away from him. He had a massive hissy fit, and he wants to bring down Project Veritas because he can no longer control it. in all of those media appearances that James O'Keefe did. Again, these are reaching millions and millions and millions of people. And exactly the same as Tim Pool last night. In every media appearance that he did, he lied about Project Veritas while he was still on the board of directors of Project Veritas. He was not removed from the board for another month and a half. And this is all in the lawsuit. One of the claims James made is he was being targeted because of Pfizer. But the employee complaints that we are going to read were documented 2 weeks after the Pfizer story. So the employee grievance process started after all of this came out, after the Pfizer story was already done, weeks later. But James used this as a smear to make against Project Veritas to make people think that Project Veritas has sold out. O'Keefe also disparaged the board by falsely insinuating that the pharmaceutical company Pfizer orchestrated O'Keefe's suspension or that it was somehow done to mollify Pfizer, a company about which a video has been released regarding potentially disturbing actions taken by Pfizer vis-a-vis the coronavirus. The Pfizer video release was on January 25th, nearly 2 weeks prior to the complaints prompting the investigation into James O'Keefe. Timcast published the full document of employee complaints. So we know this is a real thing. Okay? Let's go and take a look at it. I just need to set up on a different browser window. This was on February 9th. And they have the entire document. And this is from the February 6th board meeting. And let me see if I can make this bigger. These are all employee complaints. Oh, go away. These are all employee complaints. And every single one of these complaints aligns with exactly what a narcissist would do. James has become a power-drunk tyrant, and he is exactly who he pontificates on who we should be exposing. I'm on the side of holding James accountable for his behavior that has damaged important relationships inside and outside of Project Veritas. Let me see. Airing grievances leading to termination is what has prevented me from speaking up in the past. The times I was accused of violating my NDA, sabotage, it had my behavior labeled traitorous. Anyone who spoke up against James was a target by James. I say we exhibit some patience. We have all been on the receiving end of seeming intentionally humiliating and outright cruel behavior. And I've certainly not been here as long as many of you, and I don't mean to invalidate any of what you have experienced, but I believe James knows he's in over his head. He's scared, overworked, manic on stress, and drunk on the success of the last 2 weeks. His flaws aside, his aims are genuine, and he is a true leader. This is a staff. What you're seeing in this is a staff that is like desperate for James to get better. Honestly. He just needs a little push back in the right direction. Lack of transparency when mistakes are made from the top down. Davis was a bad hire. We all know that. I don't have insight into who Davis is, so whatever. Let's see. Another example in a group setting was in an all hands with respect to Jitsu's leaving the org. Spain had the bravery to say, we should have the ability to disagree, and to paraphrase, we are not disposable. James O'Keefe was combative, conflating internal and external issues. This stifles valuable internal voices, and we need to have dialogue in a respectful manner. So James is basically saying, you're not allowed to disagree with me in my organization. Pineapple Girl, you go and work for a narcissist, and then you come back and tell me that he ran a tight ship. If you obviously have never worked for a narcissist, you've never had that joy in your life. You go work for a narcissist, and then you come back and tell me that it's just about buttoning up and being disciplined. I received complaints from an FBI source about James. Diamondback was upset about witnessing James's treatment of staff during his interview in DC. He said that James was snapping at employees and ordering them around in a very curt manner. Diamondback called me after and told me James needs a people management class and that he was a diva. I reported this to Jen and not sure what was done after that. Recently, Diamondback was introduced to a high-dollar Project Veritas donor named X. During the dinner, James offered Diamondback a job with Project Veritas, and X was extremely supportive of this. James did not end up following through with the hiring of Diamondback due to cultural differences. The cultural differences were Diamondback noting James's micromanaging behaviors. X caught wind of this and told Diamondback he was turned off by James's overpromising and boastful demeanor during the dinner and that he intends to pull out of supporting Project Veritas. Noel and I introduced a high net worth husband and wife to Project Veritas. They are now a Project Veritas $5 donor. They've been friends with, we already know this story. I'm not going to read that one again. That was basically like people said that James treated a donor badly and the donor came out and said, no, she didn't feel that way. It's sad, embarrassing, and increasingly becoming James's standard for how he treats supporters. Honestly, it's wild and incredibly irrational behavior for someone who publicly and internally claims to be the only one raising money. I was yelled at in a small meeting in James O'Keefe's office for expressing my concern on my employees' use of time and spend. Was told it wasn't my place to question his decisions, even though it turned out to be the correct business decision and the one we ultimately followed. The meeting was loud enough that people asked how I was after I left the office. By the close of business that day, we were able to have a productive conversation. At the Democracy Partners trial in public, I was yelled at in front of jurors because he was hungry and then he took the 8-month pregnant woman's sandwich. Now, this is one of those things that, like, I laughed about some of this stuff at the time and I was like, really? You're going to complain about this? But with retrospect and with the broader context of James generally throwing a hissy fit anytime he doesn't get his way, to the point where he is now trying to destroy Project Veritas because they took him out of control, this behavior starts to make a lot more sense. Barry, Don, Tom, and Eric were the subject of bullying on the leadership meeting with at least 10 people present. No productive outcome resulted that needed a forum of everyone present. A follow-up meeting after the incident above with Jillian, Tom, Joanne, and John in regards to a high-level email, James berated the team due to poor business decisions, which was later retracted. Verbal abuse was so severe, other departments came over and apologized for James's behavior. Everyone is operating in fear because James is erratic. One doesn't know whether one will meet his needs and expectations since the target is constantly moving and the priority shifting. Laura quit because she was humiliated and demeaned by James for not being fast enough to give a critical mass story, even though she wasn't hired on as a journalist, in front of all the journalists. In a personal conversation with Jared after he left Project Veritas, it was discussed that his departure was due to personality clashes between Jared and James. Jared is also held in high regard by Project Veritas staff and played an instrumental role in the organization. All the theater stuff and how that is handled makes me very uneasy. I understand it is rationalized as raising awareness of our brand. This is like when James put on a big production of like the Project Veritas experience, which, can we all agree? Like, I thought it was weird at the time. The Project Veritas, like, look at the whole Project Veritas experience thing in the context of James O'Keefe being a narcissist, where everything needs to be about him. The Project Veritas experience was essentially this big theater production. It was a musical theater production featuring James O'Keefe singing the lead in the musical theater program. This had nothing to do with Project Veritas. This had nothing to do with investigative journalism. This had nothing to do with any of it. Brent, they do have it. They haven't released it yet. They have receipts on all of this. They have receipts on all of this. They just haven't released it yet because they're in a lawsuit. And if you guys can't wrap your heads around that because you're too interested in sucking James O'Keefe's dick, I really don't know what to tell you guys. This is a very simple question of a calendar. You have overt video evidence that James O'Keefe has lied to you to cover his own ass. If you can't read a calendar, you're not as smart as you think you are. I'm sorry. If you are incapable of putting dates on a calendar, you're not that smart, and you should work on that. So back to the Project Veritas experience, which quite frankly should be evidence enough that James needs to be the star of the show, because he quite literally put on a musical theater production on Project Veritas's dime, making him the star of the musical theater show. All of the theater stuff and how that is handled makes me very uneasy. I understand it is rationalized as raising awareness of our brand, but the cost of both of that both in a financial and sense as well as personnel and resources becomes priority over why donors actually give us money, which is to conduct investigations and expose waste, fraud, and abuse. In the end, we are in deficit now. Our fans and potential fans beyond do not respond positively to all that stuff because all they want is for us to carry out the mission. Additionally, several donors have expressed their concern with their money being used to produce a live show like the Project Veritas experience. I would describe Project Veritas's current environment with this saying: the beatings will continue until morale improves. In a recent donor meeting with James, his behavior has been arrogant and dismissive of the donor if they do not just sign up and give us 5 or 6 figure donations. This happened in the past few weeks in a meeting with a donor in Miami as well as a donor in Beverly Hills. He was not listening to what the donors have to say. James is frequently coming across as though we are desperate for funds and it is everyone's duty to send us money. Donors are hesitating about the size and whether or not gifts should be sent to Project Veritas. At a donor event in Greenwich in September, James was 1 hour and 15 minutes late. We had a room of 100 people waiting for him to speak. People commented afterwards that he could have at least apologized for being so late. This is a good example of James not realizing that everyone's time is important and should be respected. Narcissists don't realize that. Narcissists don't realize that everyone's time is valuable. They think it is just about them. September 2021, all hands right after the flood. I went into the city with James to produce stand-ups for the big release that evening. Arranging the shoot, directing the shots, wrote the script, acted as his teleprompter on the sidewalk. While we were there, we met Matt, who rode around with us for the rest of the day. While in the car, James was upset about a reel edit that was just sent over for review by someone at the Radisson. I told him I'd take care of it and began calling the guys there to adjust his notes. Not 2 minutes later, he calls Freddie after I just had, tells him the same thing I told him, looks at me and then looks at Matt, still a total stranger riding around with us, and said, "See, this is why I need to hire a good producer. I have to do everything myself." This coming after weeks of successful COVID releases while I was on the road with him the entire time had me consider quitting while on the city boat that night. James's constant habit of publicly demeaning people's roles and responsibilities, almost in a way to then step in himself and say, "See, I'm the one who fixed it." So what they're saying there is James will come in, shit on other people's work, and then position himself to swoop in and save the day because James O'Keefe is the only one that can do anything. James treated Eric with hatred over Nick, going so far as to have Vanessa strip away his title of chief of staff after just a few months and took Nick's failure as an employee out on him specifically. James ran a narrative through the entire company that he was a toxic employee and not a leader. The reality was that Nick was a bad hire, pushed through by James, and Eric saw it and voiced it for 6+ months. I'm blocking a lot of people in the chat today, guys, who can't get their fee-fees together and can't look at receipts when they're presented and want to engage in hero worship and a cult of personality. It makes no sense at all to engage in hero worship and a cult of personality, especially when you have mountains of evidence that the personality that you are rallying around is a massive narcissist who is wreaking havoc on their organization, who has misspent organization money, who has taken, I mean, you guys, like the receipts that you guys are going to see come out in this lawsuit, the amount of times that James O'Keefe has lied, the amount of times that James O'Keefe has had nothing to do with something and then swoops in and takes credit for the whole thing so that he can make a big production to promote himself. James O'Keefe has flat out lied to you about whistleblowers. He has downplayed whistleblowers he has nothing to do with, and then he takes these people that came in after the story was broken and said they were the ones who did it because they were supporting him. Former executive producer Joe quit over James's treatment and being forced to come back into the office while COVID was still very fresh, and he was an older man with health problems. He would make rude comments and tease internally to others about Joe because of his want to remain safe during COVID. Jack was constantly told to be wary of James's attitude and mood. It literally alters everyone's workflow. Not to make excuses from inner bickering and such, but the problems trickle from the top down. Nancy was fired. After Nancy was fired, Eric and Mario asked questions from James as to why the decision was made and expressed concern for the future of Project Veritas due to massive turnover in executive leadership. Guys, for everyone that's going to come in and say, "I don't care about any of this. James O'Keefe is the best. I don't care if James O'Keefe is a narcissist. I don't care. What does it matter if James O'Keefe is a narcissist? He is producing great work." One, James is not the one producing the work. He's not. James has a team of people that is producing the work that he was treating like dirt. And two, you care that leaders are narcissists because they drive away all of the people working in the organization that are helping to produce the work that they tend then take credit for. Project Veritas is going to be fine. This is another lie that conservatives are spreading all over the internet right now, and that James O'Keefe is trying his level best to reinforce. Project Veritas is going to be fine. Project Veritas's staff is pretty aligned. Project Veritas has support and donors that are absolutely supporting this direction. Project Veritas is going to be fine. And guess what they don't have anymore? They don't have James O'Keefe massively spending all their resources on luxuries that are unnecessary. They're going to be fine. Anyone who thinks that Project Veritas is going to fail is not being realistic about the situation. Initially, James sent aggressive messages in response and called Mario, but appeared to agree to disagree and move on. James never moved on. Weeks later, we held an all hands for a week at the Radisson Hotel in New Rochelle. The entire week, Mario, Eric, and Michael were publicly humiliated in every session possible in front of the whole staff. The three of them were interrogated and asked if we still had friendships with Nancy, with serious suggestions that we should cease all contact. As we know, it is actually unconstitutional to tell people who they can and cannot talk to. It was an outrageous, veiled demand. So James basically drove this woman away, was a senior staff member of Project Veritas, drove her away, and then proceeded to interrogate people in front of the entire staff about whether or not they had any contact with this person and demand to dictate who people talk to. Does that sound healthy to anyone? For a whole week, Eric, Mario, and Villani and others were so severely verbally attacked by James that the staff morale dropped to an all-time low. Mario believed he was going to be fired every single day while walking into the office in October 2021. It was the most vivid intimidation tactics ever seen. James has held a grudge against these staff members since then, where he purposefully cited these September 2021 events in his all-hands call in 2022 when he was upset. He holds a grudge, and it's become an awkward work environment, to say the least, ever since. When Eric and Jake suggested to start using Twitter Spaces for the organization, James liked the idea. When it came to the first one, James would ignore, disregard, or become busy or use the bathroom to avoid Eric's rundown of what to do and how to do it. James became very frustrated because he wasn't properly prepped. Eric was forced to take a polygraph test nearly a year after the diary had been leaked, and Neil had left Project Veritas for no legitimate reason. Eric is the chief of staff at Project Veritas. If you can't trust your own team, let alone your own team leaders, what kind of trust do you claim to have? That's bullshit. The abuse and mental aftermath has been incredibly disgusting and demeaning. Why? The why is because James O'Keefe is a narcissist. Jake was witness and victim to name-calling that was belittling to himself and others. Whenever there was an edit, graphic, minor mistake, technical error with equipment, James would say to Freddie, "These junior editors need to be trained," in a demeaning tone, sometimes with vulgar language added if James was really upset. There was one complaint that led to the top of the chain of command: recollection on who has been forgotten. Jake was in Colorado for the filming of the SIs of Chris Jacks. They ended up back at the airport in the middle of nowhere, literally, and James requested he send the footage, which was massive files, back to HQ instantly, creating fake urgency. Jake did his best with the limited Wi-Fi in the nowhere airport that was available. James would constantly be asking how long it was taking, trying not to displease James. Jake stayed in a small building to send the best he could, but was hurried by James to get back on the private plane because of time-sensitive scheduling to take off, and there would be massive charge for a late takeoff. And it goes on and on and on. Every single one of these employee complaints, guys, whether you will believe they are significant or not, aligns with what a narcissist would do. So, James O'Keefe is being sued because he egregiously broke his employment agreement, not because of some plot to silence him. Project Veritas is not trying to destroy James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe was taken out of control by Project Veritas and is now desperately trying to destroy them to get revenge and to get everyone to come and support his new organization, which he has complete control over. And if you think that James doesn't care about control, James tweeted this yesterday. Wicked people destroy what they can't control. James, I personally find that to be extremely ironic, given the fact that you yourself are trying to destroy Project Veritas with this never-ending smear bullshit campaign that is provably false based on a calendar. And the reason that James O'Keefe is on a smear campaign against Project Veritas is because he was taken out of control by Project Veritas, and he is projecting his bullshit on to Project Veritas. And then we have people like Viva Fry, who is simping for James in a way that is so beyond unethical. Let's see what Viva Fry has to say about this lawsuit. Just when you thought Project Veritas couldn't get any worse, they prove you wrong. The lawsuit against James O'Keefe and OMG is ridiculous. No, it's not. And no one should ever trust Viva as a lawyer. Again, I'm sorry. This is like, I am not a lawyer, and I can look at an employment agreement and I can look at a calendar and I can understand that this lawsuit is not ridiculous. It is a patently transparent attempt to exploit litigation privilege to defame and harass James. Bullshit. The lawsuit is based on breach of contract. Well, that's true enough. It's based entirely on James O'Keefe breaching his employment agreement because he is a lawyer. This is unethical. He is a lawyer. I know you love to suck James O'Keefe's dick, Pineapple Girl, but this is just really unbecoming, and it makes me question your intelligence level. I'm sorry. I'm like this close to thinking that you're not smart enough to be a member of my audience. I really am. Like, this is like beyond. The lawsuit is based on the fact that James O'Keefe broke his employment agreement based on a calendar. He is in his role as a lawyer. You are never on your role. You are never not in your role as a lawyer. That is blatantly false. You can't just make shit up, guys. James O'Keefe just makes shit up. I mean, if you want to be like him, I promise you, you're not going to do well here because we exist in reality on my channel. We don't exist in the land of make-believe fantasy. You see, according to Veritas, James wasn't terminated until May 2023. So everything he did after Veritas removed him from the company, setting up OMG, was a breach of contract, fiduciary responsibility. Well, this is where Viva is lying. That's a lie. James was not removed from the company. That is a lie. he had his decision-making responsibilities taken away pending the results of the audit, which they cannot release right now because of all this bullshit. The lawsuit makes vague and unsubstantiated allegations, what would otherwise be defamatory accusations. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do that at all. The lawsuit gives a list of dates and said, here is what happened on this date. Here is what happened on this date. Here is what James O'Keefe's employment agreement says. Here is how he violated the employment agreement. Viva Frei is absolutely lying. He's lying to simp for James O'Keefe. The lawsuit also pretty much confirms what James and many others believed, that his ousting of the company coincided with the Pfizer expose. The lawsuit in no way, shape confirms that. Like, that is crazy. Such a statement would be so offensive to Project Veritas because true. Viva Frei is quite literally saying, okay, so James O'Keefe goes on a conservative media tour where James O'Keefe goes on Charlie Kirk, Mark Levin, Steve Bannon, Russell Brand, Megyn Kelly. He goes on all these shows and he says, Project Veritas is bought and paid for by Pfizer. They're bought and paid for by Pfizer. They're bought and paid for by Pfizer. They're bought and paid for by Pfizer. I'm just an innocent victim. I was just trying to do journalism. It's Project Veritas that's bought and paid for by Pfizer. Went on a massive media blitz over this. Got in front of millions of people over this. Provided no evidence that this is true at all. No evidence. And Viva Frei is saying the only reason that Project Veritas would be offended by that is because it's true. Guys, if you ran a company and you found out the CEO of the company was committing massive financial malfeasance and you removed the CEO from his position because he was committing massive financial malfeasance and terrorizing the staff at the same time, and then that CEO that you just removed for massive financial malfeasance and for terrorizing the staff went on a media blitz where they told millions of people that the only reason that they were removed is because of a massive conspiracy theory. Would you like that as a CEO? Well, excuse me, as a board of directors, like running this company? Would you be okay with that as long as you knew that it wasn't true? That's quite literally what we're talking about here. That's quite literally what we're talking about. Viva Frei is saying that the only reason that Project Veritas was offended by the notion that they're bought and paid for by Pfizer is because they know it's true. That's the only reason they'd be offended. Are you fucking shitting me? Are you kidding? You think that it's okay to lie about people? And that if they defend themselves, that is proof of their guilt? Do you know what Viva Frei is doing? He's doing Robin DiAngelo. We may as well call Viva DiAngelo from now on. Because you know what Robin DiAngelo did? Robin DiAngelo said, if you are offended by the fact that I say all white people are racist, that is proof of your inherent racism, because the only reason that you're offended by the fact that I'm saying that all white people are racist is because that is proof of your racism and you know I'm right, and that's the only reason why you would be offended. That is quite literally the same argument that Viva DiAngelo is making regarding James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. He is quite literally saying the only reason that Project Veritas would be offended by the notion that they're bought and paid for by Pfizer, which James O'Keefe spread all over conservative media, the only reason that would bother Project Veritas is because they know it's true. That's the only reason at all that it would bother Project Veritas, is they know it's true. Look at that. Such a statement would only be so offensive to Project Veritas because it's true. Okay, Viva D'Angelo. Okay, lawyer. The directors and executives who had a hand in this entire process should be sued by James, by donors, and by employees at Project Veritas who are going to suffer the consequences of these bad faith actions, in my own opinion. And then let's look at the evidence that Viva provides for all of this. Okay, the lawsuit. Here he has highlighted O'Keefe was alleged to have particularly targeted female employees with mean-spirited comments about their lack of contributions to the company and inappropriate comments about personal situations like pregnancies. Guys, I know for a fact, and this will come out in the course of this lawsuit, James O'Keefe told a woman if she got pregnant that he was going to fire her. So we'll see if Viva is still highlighting that as proof of Project Veritas's blatant malfeasance when it comes lawsuit time. O'Keefe took it upon himself without authority on February 2nd to terminate the employment of Project Veritas's chief financial officer, and O'Keefe omitted to being the one who did the terminating. What Viva Fry thinks this proves is even beyond my understanding. Because James O'Keefe did not have the unilateral authority to fire the chief financial officer that was conducting the investigation into his personal malfeasance. That's what's being described here. The CFO was looking into James's spending. James didn't want the CFO looking into his spending and didn't want the CFO calling James out on things that he spent money on that he should not have spent money on. And so James O'Keefe, without the board's permission, which is required by the bylaws of his own organization, unilaterally fired the CFO, which he was not allowed to do. And I don't give a flying F if the CFO had pronouns in his LinkedIn bio or not. It makes absolutely no difference. The CFO was looking into James's financial malfeasance. James didn't want that. James didn't want to reconcile the spending with the company and reimburse them for things that he spent money on that he should not have spent money on. And so to get around it, he fired the CFO, which he did not have authority to do. And Viva Fry, lawyer, is presenting that as evidence that Project Veritas is wrong and James O'Keefe is right. That makes no godly sense. Forming and operating OMG was in violation of the employment agreement outside prohibited activities. Provably true. And on March 15th, O'Keefe went on the Charlie Kirk show and falsely implied that his separation from the plaintiffs was an aftermath of the Pfizer story and falsely stated he was thrown out of Project Veritas. Also true, Viva. Does Viva Fry have, does Viva D'Angelo have any proof that any of these actions at all by Project Veritas was connected in any way to Pfizer? I'm just going to ask again, because that seems to be what he's saying here. It's so disappointing. It's so disappointing to watch people shill like this. And then we've already covered this, but Viva talked about this too. Dan Strack has reportedly resigned as an executive of Project Veritas amidst reports of the lawsuit. And Viva said, yep, I heard that on Timcast tonight. People are rightly jumping ship. Well, if you missed the beginning of the show, Dan resigned a week ago because the organization is restructuring to fix everything that was exposed by James's wrongdoing within the organization. And Dan has decided that he doesn't want to be a part of that new structure unrelated to the lawsuit. And this was wrongly reported by Tim, who had the date stamped emails that show that Dan did not resign yesterday. Dan resigned a week ago. And Tim didn't report that accurately on his show, even though he obviously has it. And now Viva D'Angelo is falsely claiming that this had to do with the lawsuit when it did not have to do with the lawsuit. It had to do with the restructure of the organization. Does everyone see? Does everyone see what's going on? Does anyone have questions about any of this? Because what I want to do now is I want to go back and watch this video. So we've already established that James O'Keefe was not fired on February 10th. James O'Keefe was suspended pending the outcome of the audit into his own financial malfeasance on February 10th. 10 days later, James O'Keefe comes and gives this big speech to the organization. And I want to go back and I want to watch this speech again. All right, Pineapple Girl, I was going to let this go and I was going to allow you back, but now I'm just going to ban you because you're pissing me off. You can't get, like, you just give some people too many chances. I'm sorry. She wants to simp for James O'Keefe. She's welcome to go do that. The $5 a month isn't worth it, honey. I'll tell you that. So I want to go back and I want to watch this video. And I want you to watch this video within the context of everything we know. Which is that James O'Keefe is a narcissist. James O'Keefe is spreading a smear campaign against Project Veritas because he got taken out of control. And so he went and started his own company where he was in control of everything and is leaving Project Veritas, poaching employees on the way out the door, poaching their donor list, taking their equipment. By the way, I've also heard that James O'Keefe took footage. This is the trade secrets thing that Tim Pool got so upset about. I've also heard that James O'Keefe took footage that was obtained by Project Veritas, took it with him to OMG, and called it OMG's reporting. Let's watch this video within that context.
All right. Thank you all for being here on a President's Day, but I think it's fitting that, you know, we're here on President's Day. So I wrote these so I could get the words right, you know, but it's obviously from the heart. And I wanted to do this in person with you all, not over a Zoom or Teams. And, you know, he's going to film it. And these are intended just for the family here at Project Veritas. You know, this is just for us. I recognize that when you send something out to 60 people, but I'm not going to do that today. So I just wanted to tell you the truth. So I'm going to read this and I'm going to try my best to, you know, speak from the heart, but I did write these words and I want to tell you what's going on. So here we go. It's going to take me about 15 minutes to do this. Journalism is reporting things powerful people want kept hidden for the wrong reasons, moral wrongs, bad behaviors, as journalists were the custodians of the public's conscience. And as we've gone deeper and deeper exposing and illuminating corruption, the lies hidden from public view, the line that separates good and evil becomes more clear. not just in the institutions we investigate, but within one another. Throughout my 13 years doing this, our mission has evolved from simply being about exposing the truth with some hidden cameras.
This is James's MO. We saw this yesterday, where anytime James is in trouble, what James does is he tells a sob story about how hard he's worked and how hard this has all been and how many things he's overcome and how difficult this all is. And by the way, guys, I don't actually doubt a lot of the things that James is saying. I don't doubt that it's been a slog. I have said a million times, I actually think that like James O'Keefe was the person that they needed to build Project Veritas. You know, being a narcissist also has benefits. Narcissists are some of the most successful people in the world. Narcissists get shit done. Narcissists want to be on top. Narcissists will sometimes do things that other people wouldn't dare even dream of doing in order to get to the point of being on top. There are actually benefits to it. And so I actually don't doubt that it has been really hard for James O'Keefe to build this. What I am saying is that his motivation for taking you through this whole long story is not to say, guys, this has just been so hard and I'm just doing a little bit of a, we're recalibrating here and I just want to, walk you through that's not what he's doing. He's doing it to gain your sympathy and to obfuscate what is actually going on by pulling at your emotional heartstrings so that you overlook what has actually happened. Everyone needs to put their logic hat on for a second. Everyone needs to remind ourselves that the reason that James O'Keefe was in this position when he gave this speech is because he had been terrorizing the staff for years. He had been spending the donors' money for years, and he on things that were not related to what Project Veritas is actually intended to do. And he's finally been caught, and he's been called on the carpet, and he knows he's not worming his way out of it. And so now he's emotionally manipulating people to take his side, trying to poach Project Veritas employees to leave Project Veritas and come with him.
To something more transcendental, giving people hope, right? That's what we do. And I'm going to stand here because I just feel like I'm filming a video for the audience. And as we ascended into that higher purpose, which I think we all understand that we have suffered through triumph and disaster along the way in a similar fashion to what I wrote about in my book. The first chapter was called Suffering. So the line that separates good and evil passes not through the states, nor classes, nor political parties, but right through every single human heart, to quote Solzhenitsyn. So that line in the sand becomes more clear the deeper we go in investigating these powerful institutions. So over the last few weeks, I have felt a lot of despair and seen a lot of evil, and felt overcome with various emotions over the last few weeks. You could say I've seen glimpses of heaven and hell, of darkness and light. But what I take away from these is the gratitude that I have for many of you, for most of you. And there is such goodness in so many of you that I have seen, and I am grateful for that. And the generosity and goodwill we have steadily built over the past 13 years with so many people. I've received thousands of text messages and phone calls from people all over the world concerned about my well-being. But as I was going through this process, I reflected upon my appreciation for many of you. What makes us great is that we do this work because we actually believe in it, right? We actually believe in this. It shocks people that we do, and we have a passion for it, and we have principle. Like, I know, we don't sell out. I think that's fair, at least most of us. We have a passion for doing the right thing in a visual way, no matter what. That's what binds us.
I told Project Veritas earlier today, I was like, when I was talking to some of their employees, I was like, you guys need to get in touch with HD Tutor. HG Tutor will be able to help you guys because this is going to get worse. I hope people understand this. Like, James O'Keefe is going to get worse during the course of this lawsuit. He's not going to stop the smear campaigns. And to be quite frank, I really did recommend they get in touch with him and talk to him about like what they can expect to experience from James in the course of this. And I hope they do. I mean, I don't know. I only have influence beyond, like, I don't have any influence beyond like offering a suggestion, but I think that that would be a really valuable use of their time, to be honest.
I know many of you have experienced this despair alongside of me in the last couple weeks. One of you just told me the other day that you'd go work at Walmart at the night shift so that you could do this during the day. That's what one of you said to me. I believe you. Rather than sell out. In fact, I know this is true for many of you and many more out there who wish to be part of this. It's true. I remember back in the beginning, 13 years ago, when I had like no money, I would have to use bubble gum, duct tape. I think you were around during that time. I keep looking at you because I've known you since Andrew Breitbart. And my grandmother's chinchilla. I literally had to place a Project Veritas sticker on a piece of cardboard that I ripped off from my dad's cardboard and stick it to a microphone at Radio Shack because I had no money to buy a flag mic. And this was after experience.
He did this last night on Tim Pool too. He did this last night in his Twitter space, in his private Twitter space. And then he repeated the same story on Tim Pool. And guys, when you see this, when you see the same things repeated over and over and over again, you really start to understand that this is part of the script. This is part of how he has learned how to emotionally manipulate people to get them on his side.
A meteoric high of the acorn story. I was up and I was down. And I was broke again. And I was arrested. And then crashed down to a meteoric low. Back in the carriage house, resorting once again to bubble gum and duct tape to achieve the NPR investigation that took us yet again to a meteoric high. I was so broke that I had to scribble my name and phone numbers on pieces of paper because I had no business cards. And so the saga continues. Back then, there were no employees and no budget. But I felt the same sensation this week. I feel the sensation right now. As Steve Jobs once wrote about being fired from Apple, the company he founded, quote, "The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. Less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life." So back then I trudged on from the back of a stretch limo in DC, two guys, I was on federal probation, so I couldn't be there, but two of my volunteers dressed like Muslim Brotherhood fundamentalists armed with hidden cameras. Project Veritas was born again in 2011 for a second time. A couple of donors eventually became 100,000 donors.
By the way, one of those guys that he worked with back in 2011, I've been talking to him today too. One of those guys that he just mentioned in this speech is pissed at James O'Keefe and says that James O'Keefe has been stealing ideas and other people's work for years. And he's been tweeting about it too. Got a super chat coming in from King Peter of the chat. I don't know why it's not coming in. It's going to come in as soon as I hit play. I know it is. All right. Well, the chat is not updating over on StreamYard. So I'll read the super chat from King Peter, and as soon as I read it, it'll pop right up. It says, "To anyone simping for James, I was skeptical and wanted to hear James's side, and then on Timcast, he said nothing the whole time. The receipts guy brought nothing." James can't disprove what Project Veritas is saying. He can't disprove it at all. And that's why he's not.
Owners present day, 13 years later. after almost a decade and a half of 85-hour work weeks, sometimes traveling 300 days a year. I'm on the road, packing multiple meetings in a day, and plenty of blood, sweat, and tears, the likes of which I could never have possibly fathomed. The external threats and pressure inflicted against myself and some of us has been unimaginable. I'm going to summarize them. Handcuffed by the FBI on 2 separate occasions, 12 years apart, having my phones confiscated and private information leaked to the New York Times, being placed on effective house arrest for 3 years between May of 2010 and May of 2013, being sued dozens of times, being served 2 separate criminal grand jury subpoenas in New Hampshire in the last 10 years, getting pursued in a high-speed chase by a New Jersey education union official on Interstate 80 in Passaic, deposed many times, suffered through mediation with insurance companies where they had all of our emails. They had everything, but they evidently didn't have anything on me. Getting my home raided by the FBI, having my loved ones put in handcuffs in the hallway, and having our office destroyed by a hurricane, literally a hurricane, which forced us into a temporary workplace before rebuilding and stirred up disgruntled employees, including grievances about me, which I will get to in a minute. The list goes on. Even so, as a former board member told me 10 years ago, Project Veritas will never be stopped from the outside. It will only be because we stopped ourselves, right?
And that's James setting up the smear campaign. Right there. Did you guys see that? That is James setting up the smear campaign. We will never be stopped by outside forces. If we're stopped, we've done it to ourselves. Okay, James. All right.
I'll get to that too in a minute. Prophetic as it may be, that is exactly where we find ourselves in the situation today. A situation where I've been stripped of my authority as CEO and removed from the board of directors. I bet you didn't know that. I'll get to that in a minute.
He was not removed
Contrary
from the board
to
of
what public
directors.
statements make.
He was not removed from the board of directors. He was stripped of his decision-making capabilities as the CEO. He could not hire and fire people. He could not use the company credit card because he was overspending on things that had nothing to do with the company. But he was not removed from the board of directors. That was a blatant lie.
They say. And by the way, I have copies for this. I will not give them to you yet. I will give them to you after I'm done. And there are board minute meetings, which you'll all get a copy of, that read as follows. Quote, James O'Keefe indefinitely suspended as CEO without compensation, February 10th. Yes. Quote, indefinite suspension of James O'Keefe from the board, dated February 10th.
Indefinite suspension pending the results of the audit, which James left out because it didn't look good for his story. He was not indefinitely suspended, period. He was indefinitely suspended pending the results of the audit. It says so on the receipt that he put on the screen.
"5 days before the statement saying that I'm still the CEO.
It does not matter that he was suspended without compensation. To everyone who thinks that they stopped paying James O'Keefe and therefore all of this is null and void, it does not matter. It does not matter. I'm going to say it again. It does not matter. That is one of their talking points that they are expecting you to shill for them that makes no difference at all in the course of events that is going on. And if I could show people in the chat saying that, I would, but for some reason, StreamYard is not connecting to YouTube chat right now because it's just being extra difficult.
I don't know why this is happening now.
It's being happening because
or specifically why this is happening
engaged in
suddenly,
malfeasance
right now.
and terrified employees.
As you know, at the helm of Veritas, I've never...
See, what James just did there, where he was like, I don't know why this is happening right now. Again, this is James trying to make the public think that the only reason this is happening at the time that it did was because of Pfizer. That is the only possible explanation for why this was happening, except that it did not happen because of Pfizer. It happened because a lot of employees came forward 2 weeks after Pfizer to talk about how James had been terrorizing them for years. And in conjunction with that, they had started to uncover that James was spending money on things that he really shouldn't have been spending money on. That's why it happened at that point. It had nothing to do with Pfizer at all. There's no evidence that it had to do with Pfizer at all. James is twisting the timeline to make you think something that isn't true to obfuscate from his own behavior. Shauna, thank you for the super chat. There's also the narcissistic tribe theory, which is that it benefits the genetic collective to have someone who can rob, war, plunder with no guilt, as long as it's aimed at the other. Like I said, I think that narcissists are extremely effective at many things. There are a lot of things that narcissists are really effing good at. And, you know, so I'm not disputing what Shauna says. Again, I think that James O'Keefe had to be a narcissist to build Project Veritas. Who in their right mind is going to do something like that? He had to be a narcissist to accomplish this. But that doesn't excuse that he grossly misused donor money and terrorized his own staff for years.
allowed or entertained speculation. I only report the facts. I think you know this. You're involved in hiring. But don't you know that so many people want to go beyond the facts? I'm adamant that I'm only going to stick to the facts. So much so that sometimes we don't hire people if they want to pontificate and opine about what's going on in society. And I've had people leave because they don't agree with this vision, okay, of what a journalist ought to do. But fortunately, I have recordings and documents to back up everything I'm about to tell you. So everything I'm about to tell you, I have documentation and proof. So you don't have to say I wasn't there. You can listen to it and watch it for yourself. So I'm about a quarter of the way through here. Bear with me. For the last 13 years, I've been the same person I've always been, probably better than I used to be. These are adjectives some people used: tough, hard charging, driven, creative, exacting. I have extremely high standards and somewhat disorganized. I don't ask you how your Thanksgiving was, okay? Or the names of your siblings, although
because he doesn't care.
A good leader probably should. I don't do that. I ask a lot of you, but I don't ever ask you to do anything I haven't myself done and continue to do. I haven't always been the most...
Remember, and I said this at the beginning, but I'm going to repeat it again just in case new people are commenting. I heard a story today from someone at Project Veritas that was basically someone that had been associated with Project Veritas died. They called to tell James that the guy died, and James deflected from the fact that someone died and made the entire call about him. James O'Keefe doesn't ask about people's families because he does not care. James O'Keefe doesn't ask they don't make small talk because he does not care. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, I suppose, except that it's exactly what a narcissist would do.
Compassionate leader. And that is admittedly a fault.
I mean, the fact that he's making this whole big going away speech from Project Veritas and filming it and leaking it on the internet, that's a pretty effing narcissist thing to do. Have any of you, when you've left a job, made a big going away speech for 40 minutes and then filmed it and put it on the internet? He's got the entire staff gathered around him. He's reminiscing. He's getting the responses from the staff in the room that, some of whom I'm sure were pretty upset with the fact that he was leaving. So he's drinking in that fuel the entire time. He's giving this big going away speech. This is a narcissist thing to do, man. Come on.
Mine. Something I need to work on. But I remember when I was back in the carriage house in the beginning, there was a journalist in the beginning, and he pointed this out to me. So, you need to be more compassionate. Ask me about my life. And it hurt him that I wasn't more compassionate towards him. Personally, I told him it was difficult for me to change myself. But this experience stayed with me, and I always have known this about myself. I've tried to do a better job of that, but the truth is I've been very hurried, very busy, pressed for time every day, trying to pack in so much in a day. I think you all know this in meetings. I'm busy because I'm trying to get so much done in an hour, all the while moving at the speed of light to raise as much money, to hire more people, to take care of you guys in a fundamental way, although I may not be good at communicating the reasons why I am that way. I'm doing as much as I humanly possibly can so I could build this place out. And
do you notice, so James says, I can't communicate to you why I do things the way I do and why I'm so great. And when he said that, the donor numbers popped up on the screen.
And do more. And that's what we did every year, each year since 2010. Growing every year, sometimes doubling our revenue, doubling our impact. I have a chart here, which again, I'm going to hand to you, the chart of the growth every year. I have never slowed down. I recognize that perhaps I should, but number one, there's a trade-off to slowing down. And number two, I need the right leaders around me in order to do that. So along the way, there has been...
I need the right leaders around me in order to do that. The right leaders mean people who will let James O'Keefe do whatever he wants to do without questioning him, without getting in his way, without investigating his spending, without doing any of those things. That's what he means by I need the right leaders around me. James O'Keefe handpicked every single leader in that organization. James O'Keefe handpicked every single member of the board. These were all people that James O'Keefe had known for years. These were not people that were forced onto James O'Keefe. These were not people that James O'Keefe did not have a hand in hiring. He hired all of them. And then as soon as they started investigating his spending and calling him out on terrorizing his staff, James is like, these are just not the type of leaders that are going to allow me to be successful. He picked all of them.
Much turnover, replacing people with better people. This was painful to me and to many of you who witnessed it. But that has always been happening since day one. There was turnover 10 years ago when I had to fire a friend from college. Let's just maybe hold off on that until the end. So I'll make sure that everyone has a copy of this. And I don't intend to publish this. This is for you guys internally. I had 10 years ago, I had to fire a friend from Rutgers. That hurt me. It took me months to get over this. I never discussed this. I felt for him, but it was the conflict that ate at me, but I had to do it. See, leadership has a price, and results often come at a human cost. Maybe fewer in this world, present day, are willing to pay that price. Many people want the fruits of leadership,
is able to do
such
it.
as
Only
its power,
him.
results,
Only him.
Twitter followings, secondary effects. But the price of the responsibilities, burdens, trials, hardships, difficult decisions, or just sheer suffering, I don't think people want that. And all through the years, things fundamentally continued on an upward trajectory for this place, albeit turnover. And I'm a hard guy to work for sometimes. We file our annual tax return. A public tax return is required by the IRS. and my compensation is set by an independent board of directors via a compensation committee. 4 times a year, our chief financial officer has submitted company financials to the board. That's every quarter. And our board approves it in quarterly meetings. All 3 members of the C3 were present, and we have subjected both the C3 and the C4 to audits from outside independent accounting agencies each and every year. That happens. That has always been happening. Nothing about how I've conducted myself over the past 13 years has really fundamentally changed until now. So what has changed in the last 3 weeks?
This is again.
What has changed?
This is again James trying to say, do you know what the only thing that's changed? Pfizer. Pfizer is the only thing that's happened in the last 3 weeks, guys. Pfizer is the only explanation for why any of this is happening. That's not true. Another thing that happened 2 weeks after Pfizer was a whole bunch of employees came forward and talked about how James had been terrorizing them for years. Another thing that happened is that James tried to unilaterally fire the CFO who was investigating his spending and trying to get James to reimburse the organization for things that he spent money on that he shouldn't have spent money on. Those things happen too, but James is again doing his level best to say, guys, do you know what this is about? Pfizer. It's about Pfizer. It has to be about Pfizer. Pfizer is the only explanation. That's not what it was about. Vince, thank you for the super chat, Vince. I wish I could show it on the screen, but for some reason my StreamYard is not connecting to a YouTube chat right now. Vince with the $50 super chat. I really appreciate it. I think this is only the 2nd or 3rd super chat I've ever sent. It would have been more, but I figured you'd appreciate the other $50 over at Substack. Yes, I would appreciate it over at Substack, Vince. Keep up the good work. Don't let the hard-headed get you down, Carlin. Vince, you are such an amazing supporter. I so appreciate you. Thank you for the super chat.
The only thing that has changed is that we broke the biggest story in our organization's history.
That wasn't the only thing that
changed.
changed.
What I'm talking about? Pfizer.
That was not the only thing that had changed. That was a blatant lie. James just blatantly lied. Not the only thing that had changed.
The last week of January, with 50 million views. That broke the record by 10x. Our video became a global phenomenon. It was about Pfizer and one of the directors discussing mutating the virus. Our confrontation video, where he locked me in a pizza restaurant with you, and he smashed the equipment and called the police, that became a phenomenon and was riveting television for our audiences glued to their screens. That was probably one of my favorite things that ever happened.
I want you guys to notice something there. James was not talking about catching Pfizer. He wasn't talking about getting that Pfizer guy on tape saying the things he did that I'm not going to say on YouTube for reasons. He wasn't talking about that part of it. James, when it comes to the Pfizer investigation, focuses in on confronting the Pfizer guy. He doesn't focus on exposing the Pfizer guy. He focuses on confronting the Pfizer guy. Now, if you had to say which one was more important, was it more important to expose the Pfizer guy, or was it more important to confront the Pfizer guy after he had already been exposed? Which do you think is more important? Exposing the Pfizer guy or confronting the Pfizer guy? Let me know in the chat what you think. I personally think that it was more important to expose Pfizer. The follow-up confrontation is fun, don't get me wrong. It was a great video. James is not wrong about that. That was great TV. That was entertaining. It was cringe. It was awesome. It was amazing. However, the important part is actually exposing Pfizer. Why do you think that James is spending more time talking about the confrontation Then he was talking about the expose to begin with and making it seem as though the confrontation was the most important thing that happened, the best thing that happened, the most critical thing that happened, because James was not involved in exposing it. Now, James probably did train the reporter who exposed it. That's true, and we need to give him credit for that. James has pioneered this type of journalism. James has trained a lot of people. Okay, fine. I don't want to take any of that away from him. But the fact is that James was not involved directly in exposing Pfizer. James was only involved directly in confronting Pfizer. And that is why James is focusing more on confronting Pfizer than he is on exposing it, because it's the confrontation that feeds the narcissism. The exposure, which he wasn't involved in, is not deemed to be as important because James wasn't involved in it. Does everyone see what's happening?
It was just really unbelievable. It was like true to be false and seemingly too false to be true, but it was real. If someone else is here, you can let him in. Hello, come on in. Just giving a few remarks to the team here, so you came at the right moment. So the only thing that changed were these videos. Outlets in India and China covered the story, and our social media exploded like never before. Our employees and board members' Twitter accounts also exploded like never before. Pfizer even put out a non-denial denial, like you always capture these things, where they basically admitted they were mutating the virus, albeit they buried this admission in jargon. But it was still an admission. And it was extraordinary that Pfizer responded to us with an admission, not denying that this guy was who he was. What an amazing turn of events. That is the only thing that's changed in 13 years of me being who I am. And then suddenly, an unusual emergency happened just a few days after that. I think we have one more person here, if we could let him in. So suddenly, an unusual, and I'm going to take you through this. I'm going to take you through what happened. Some of you don't know these things. Hello. We're talking about the story we broke. An unusual emergency happened. On Thursday, February 2nd, that's a few days after the Pfizer story, I was informed by an officer of Project Veritas on the phone while en route to the airport that he would resign unless I stepped down as CEO. We've been having a conflict of visions, him and I, over fundraising.
This is the CFO that James fired unilaterally when he did not have the authority to fire him unilaterally.
Are they in fundraising here? I guess no one from fundraising is here. There were tactical disagreements about the boldness of approaches soliciting donations. I was told, and I'm paraphrasing, by asking for X dollars right now, you will prevent 10X dollars down the road. That advice ran contrary to everything I knew to be true in my 13 years of fundraising. But that conflict was even more fundamental and essentially boiled down to this. And my vision, I'm going to paraphrase Howard Rourke, the architect, quote, I don't build in order to have donors. I have donors in order to build. That's what I believed, and I felt like we had a conflict of visions.
James is trying to demonize the fundraising guy that he himself hired, because that fundraising guy was trying to get James to stop extravagantly spending on bullshit. And he's saying, and James is couching this in terms of like, I'm Howard Rourke in this situation. Like, he's doing it to prevent people from asking what really happened, and he's doing it to prevent people from criticizing him.
We don't measure our success only in terms of how much money we bring in. We measure our success in terms of our impact. Remember Acorn? I don't think I raised a single dollar off that. I had a stack of media coverage to the ceiling. We measure our success in terms of what we produce, not just in terms of our wallets. That was a pretty fundamental conflict, I felt. The day prior, I had informed him in front of his colleagues that if he wasn't willing to follow my lead, he'd be shown the door. I tried to deal with it.
If he wasn't willing to do whatever James O'Keefe wanted him to do, then he would be fired.
Privately, but I was unsuccessful, and the disagreement boiled over publicly in a staff meeting. The next day, this individual refused to resign, so I fired him. Later that
So James O'Keefe caused a big fucking scene in a staff meeting because he was pissed off that the CFO wouldn't do exactly what he wanted him to do, and then he unilaterally fired the CFO, which he did not have the authority to do. Do you guys see that? The tensions boiled over in a staff meeting. What caused those tensions to boil over, James? Did you cause those tensions to boil over because you were pissed off that your hand-picked CFO wouldn't bend the knee and do whatever you wanted him to do?
That same day, that's Thursday, February 2nd, a few days after the 50 million viewed Visor videos, I was informed by a different officer of Project Veritas that he would go to the board in a few hours from that moment and have an emergency vote to restructure this company, receiving an agenda in my email while I was sitting on an airplane tarmac with the doors closing.
And that was because James had fired the CFO unilaterally. The board's response was to James firing someone he didn't have the authority to fire because that person was asking questions about James O'Keefe spending money. Does everyone understand this? James is really trying his best to paint himself as the victim here. But he's not the victim. He caused the entire problem in the first place.
The meeting was scheduled for the moment that my plane landed in Nashville. It became clear to me in that moment I would be removed from my position at Project Veritas by the time I landed at my destination. I bet you didn't know that. I have a copy of the emergency meeting here for you guys to take a look at. It's in writing. You could read it. You don't have to be there. You can read the minutes. They're official board minutes. They're written by a lawyer. My first question on the phone to this guy, my colleague, as I was staring at this agenda when the stewardess was asking me to get off the phone, was, quote, "What are we going to tell our supporters if I'm removed from my position?" I think that's the first question. I had 100 questions, but that was the first one. My colleague, who is an officer of Project Veritas, responded by saying, "Our supporters wouldn't have to find out."
I strongly doubt that's what was said.
Sounds like something you would get in the Claire McCaskill campaign.
I strongly doubt that.
It sounds like something you'd expose. I was so shocked by this. And again, the stewardess was asking me to get off the phone. I guess you could say that I was in a state of complete shock.
So
So
essentially what happened is the board was discussing suspending James from his decision-making capabilities. And James is like, how are we going to communicate that to donors? And the board said, we don't have to tell them because, I mean, conceivably, they don't actually have to tell them. What this actually tells me is the leadership of Project Veritas was trying to be responsible by working out what was going on, by removing James from being able to spend more money or making more unilateral staffing decisions, doing their investigations, completing their audit before they were talking about suspending James while they figured out what was going on so that they can make responsible business decisions. James didn't want that. So now he's reframing what happened to make it seem like the board was just going to change everything. They were going to unilaterally fire me and they weren't going to tell anyone about it. I would bet all the money in my bank account that that is not what happened at all.
Our supporters not be informed of such an enormous thing. It was a lapse in judgment so severe that it was itself a fireable offense to make a statement like that. It was a lapse in judgment so severe, it was impossible to hide my removal from my position at Veritas to anybody. As the CEO and chief fundraiser, I have to explain the context of my role to thousands of people, 300 days a year on the road, while soliciting them for funds so that I can pay you. And I knew many of our supporters and donors would not like that change. If I was removed from the chief decision maker at the organization I founded, I share who we are, our vision, our structure, our strategy with everybody. In fact, hiding something so fundamental from people is something that we stand against in principle.
And here's what James is doing here. He's like, the board was trying to hide this information from you. I'm completely transparent. The board was making all these decisions in secret, probably because they were influenced by Pfizer. They didn't want you to know any of this. But I do everything in the open. I do everything transparently. I would never hide information from you. Do you know why the board's hiding information from you? Because they're bought and paid for by Pfizer. That's what he's doing here, guys. Do you see this? I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't want this to be true. But this is what is going on.
Particularly with the amount of scrutiny that we're under. The doors closed, the plane took off, but somehow, over the next few hours, I was able to convince the board to push this emergency meeting to that Monday, February the 6th. The very next day, and this is where things get really bizarre. So fasten your seatbelts. The very next day, on Friday, this is now Friday, February 3rd, a board member reached out to one of our journalists and stated, quote, "You get a raise if there is a restructure without James O'Keefe at Project Veritas." I have a copy of the text message.
That's not exactly what it says. It says, what is Project Veritas without James O'Keefe? I don't see how that would work. What is in Project Veritas without 70% of its employees? And that's the response. It's like, okay, so what is Project Veritas without James O'Keefe? Well, what is Project Veritas without the 70% of employees that James is pissed off that are going to leave? What is the solution? Restructure, oversight, free hugs. They were trying to do the restructure. Restructure number 1, what would this look like? I get a raise? Question mark, you? And then it says, well, that's a start, but what about James O'Keefe? I mean, it was like obviously a joke. But a restructure at this point is what they were actually working on. So again, James is like taking something out of context that I think was just an offhanded flip remark. And he's making it seem like this was all just about money and giving Project Veritas people raises. That's not what it was about. I'm sorry. He's deflecting and obfuscating from his own actions.
And I'll give it to all of you. I've redacted the name of the journalist. The board member deleted the message, but not before our journalist took screenshots. Good job, journalist. Yeah. On Sunday, February 5th, now that's Sunday, 2 days after the Friday, a board member requested my presence at his home. He informed me, quote, "You had nothing to do, James, with this Pfizer story," unquote.
Because you didn't.
Perplexed by this, I took out my iPad and showed him a video of myself confronting the Pfizer executive, which had 11 million views on YouTube. He responded, quote, "But that was after the undercover video had already been done," unquote. I pointed out that the brave journalist, and many of you know who this person is, I'm not going to name anyone, who recorded the interaction was someone that I had to sit down over a year prior, remember, over dinner, for hours, talking off the proverbial ledge, insisting he take the long, arduous road to get the story about Pfizer. And indeed he did. The board member responding to me saying that said he did not know that and admitted that another board member was persuading him to the contrary. In the meeting, we're fast forwarding to Monday, 2 weeks ago. On the 6th, I offered an apology letter to the board for my tone of voice in the office at the leadership meeting the week before.
What did James do? What did he do in that leadership meeting that he had to offer an apology to the board. He's going to gloss right over that. What exactly did James O'Keefe do that necessitated an apology to the entire board?
Intended to also share that apology for my tone of voice with our staff. But the board refused to accept my apology, nor believe that it was sincere. They also did not support my sending it to the staff.
So you expect me to believe that a board that was hand-picked by James O'Keefe was just so mean that James O'Keefe just did nothing wrong, but still offered an apology for doing nothing wrong, and the board was just so mean that they refused to accept his obviously sincere apology? Does that make sense to anyone else? Reagan in the chat says, I bet he blew up and went crazy. I bet he did too. I bet he absolutely blew up and went crazy. But the board, it's really the board that's the fault, guys. It's the board that's the problem, because the board is bought and paid for by Pfizer, remember, according to James. That's the only reason any of this is happening. It's not because James flew off the handle in a narcissistic rage because he was told no. It's because of the board. They're the problem. And when James tried to apologize, because, it wasn't his fault that the board told him no and he flew into a narcissistic rage. When James tried to apologize, the board was just so mean to James that they wouldn't accept his apology. Vision says he resigns at the end of this. No, he didn't, Vision. He did not resign. He did not resign. Just because he took his stuff and left the building does not mean that he resigned.
I imagine many of you didn't even know that I drafted an apology. Then I was subject to a 6.5-hour listing of grievances, which included taking black cars to meetings. I don't know the significance of the color of the vehicle. And taking a few charter jets over the years to pack multiple PV meetings in a day. One of those jets, I think we had a meeting in New York, Wisconsin, and California in the same day, and it raised $2 million. But the revenue part was omitted. There was also some truly bizarre grievances, including my failure to record audio in one encounter at a bar in upstate New York, and an allegation that I stole a pregnant woman's sandwich in federal court. There were also discussions from a few staffers with donors in the boardroom. Donors were listening to some of this, and some of these were sent directly to donors without my consent. Donors who have no knowledge of my personal life and have no business asking questions about my personal life, about girls I've dated in the past. A fundraising colleague relayed, and again, this is going to start getting really strange, but this board meeting was video recorded.
Bot asked in the chat, do I think he really stole a pregnant woman's sandwich? Yes, I do. Yeah, I absolutely believe that James O'Keefe stole the sandwich of a woman who was 8 months pregnant. Now, if that had happened in isolation, and that's all that happened, and there was never any blowups at board meetings, there was never any gross financial malfeasance, there was never any terrorizing of the staff. If it was just about the damn sandwich, I don't think anyone would give a flying flip. This is not about the sandwich. It is not about the black cars. It is not about any of that. Anytime James brings up the black cars, he is trying to deflect on his behavior that has landed him in this position. And he's trying to say, it was just the black cars. They're being so silly because they're concerned about black cars. I don't even know what a black car is. I don't even know why the color of the car is important. It's deflect. He has spent more time talking about black cars than he did about the blow up in the staff meeting that necessitated him apologizing to the entire board, which the board was so pissed about that they wouldn't even accept his apology because they were so mean. Because they're bought and paid for by Pfizer, which is a rumor that was started by James to smear the board because he was pissed off that they took him out of control.
We'll get to that in a minute. A fundraising staffer relayed, quote, concerns about my behaviors regarding videos where I, quote, literally chased a Twitter executive around New York. By acclamation from all of you in 2022, that video about the Twitter chase was one of the most successful videos. But yet, your colleagues in a boardroom were expressing concerns about it. Every board member previously communicated their love of that video, but none pushed back in that moment when the staffer criticized it. Why? The attacks were so severe against me personally in that boardroom. And again, this is all video recorded, and I suggest that you ask for that.
I
will not provide that
to
to
see
you.
the video, James. I would love to see
it. The attacks were so severe.
Why isn't James providing the video? James just said, I would love to provide you. I would fucking love to see that video. Maybe we'll get to see that video during the trial. That would be really great. See you later, Beth. Have a good one.
That one board member asked, quote, is there anything James O'Keefe is good at? That's what your board member said. Oh, and by the way, this meeting was video recorded. I'm going to keep saying that. You may want to ask existing board members if they want to share that entire video with you. I suggest you request the entire 7-hour or so video to see for yourself what actually happened. You don't have to have been there. You simply need to watch the video and hear all of the testimony.
I would love to see the
After
video.
the 6 hours, I was asked what I had to say for myself. I was given about 10 seconds to respond. And then
By the way, James is probably emphasizing that video because he knows they can't release it. He knows they can't. That's why he's emphasizing it. Mock Girl says if there even is a trial, well, Project Veritas is demanding a jury trial. It's in the lawsuit. So I think that Project Veritas is pretty pissed. I think based on the conversations that I've had with them this morning, I think Project Veritas is pretty pissed. I think they're going to make sure this goes to trial. I don't think they're going to let this go. I think that they want their name cleared. I could be wrong about that, but the impression that I got is that they were pretty committed to this course of action.
Missed. Then, and I'm reading from board minutes drafted by lawyers who are taking a record of what the board members said and did, a vote was called to strip me of all of my authority and decision-making at this organization for half a year. That's
so
180
not
days.
Indefinite.
Again, it's in the board minutes.
So not indefinite. Not indefinite. Because James has said, I was indefinitely suspended. I was indefinitely suspended. I was indefinitely suspended. And he's trying to make it seem as though there was no end in sight, even though the document clearly says suspended pending the results of the 2-dimensional audit. So he keeps leaving that part out. And now he's saying, look, it was for 180 days. Well, guess what? That directly contradicts the story that James was shilling earlier, which is that it was just an indefinite suspension. It was going to be forever. No, it wasn't. In writing.
I have a copy of it. It says, quote, the CEO's ability to make these decisions suspended for 180 days with such power transferred to the executive director.
What it says, it's James is not being specific about what decisions they were preventing him from making. So let's actually read this. The board voted and passed the following. The CFO and Chief Strategy Officer that James unilaterally fired when he did not have the ability to do so, both of those people would be reinstated. The CEO's ability to hire and fire staff is suspended for 180 days, with such powers transferred to the executive director in direct consultation with the board. So because James abused his power by firing people that he did not have the status to fire unilaterally based on his own company's bylaws, the board said, James, we're removing your decision-making abilities because you didn't follow the rules. That's what it says. The executive director reports to the board. The CEO is placed on paid leave for 2 weeks. The CEO surrenders the company credit card, so they didn't want him spending any more money. The CEO's access to proprietary information, including donor lists, is restricted. The CEO remains as CEO and member of the board. James isn't going to read that part, but that part is very, very clear. The board explicitly said that no matter how many times James O'Keefe goes on Tim Pool and lies about being fired on February 10th, the board explicitly says that James O'Keefe remains as CEO and as a member of the board. King Peter in the chat says demanding a jury trial is one way to push for settlement. Peter, like I said, I spoke to a number of Project Veritas people this morning. I don't think that's what they're doing. I do not think that Project Veritas wants a settlement. I think that Project Veritas wants to clear their name from the epic amount of bullshit that James O'Keefe has spread all over the media about them. And I strongly doubt, I could be wrong, I guess we'll see, but I strongly doubt there's going to be a settlement.
The executive director reports to the board. The CEO is placed on leave for 2 weeks, and the CEO's access to donors is restricted. So I can't talk to donors. I can't raise money. Let's see. Okay. My first question before I was dismissed, I asked how the remaining team will manage the company and what the plan was. That's something you had said. What's the plan? But they didn't provide one. It was clear they didn't actually have one. And then I was dismissed.
Literally did provide one.
So I went off the grid as requested.
They literally did.
Went hiking with Kennedy.
Executive director reports to the board.
Within a few days of going off the grid, I started receiving missed calls and texts from the same board members and officers who demanded I be gone. They informed the staff that they're waiting to hear from me. I found that odd. There was a corporate resolution demanding that I be gone for 2 weeks. I was a little worried about violating the corporate resolution. Wouldn't you?
Bullshit, James.
This was while I was commanded by a motion of a board to be literally gone on paid leave for 2 weeks. And then an officer at Project Veritas took a screenshot of my read receipts of text messages and distributed them to you, saying, quote, "You owe your team a response. Please allow communication." This was during the time when I was required by the board to be gone. Then it's going to get stranger. Then, and again, I'm going to give you copies of all this. Then, on February 10th, you guys don't know what I'm about to tell you. Another board meeting occurred. Again, I'm gone. With the meeting's minutes.
Remember, James claimed on Tim Pool's show last night that he was fired on February 10th. Let's see if "I was fired" comes out of James's mouth in relation to the February 10th board meeting from the video that he released on February 20th.
Reflecting that they had indefinitely suspended me from the board. By this time, they had
indefinitely suspended pending the results of the two-dimensional audit. He didn't say fired, though. Indefinitely suspended, pending the results of the audit, is not the same thing as fired.
It stripped me of all of my authority as CEO. During the time I was on leave, they kicked me off the board. So I can't be
Also
a CEO
false.
if I have...
Remember, James was not kicked off the board. James was not removed from the board until the end of April.
no authority. I can't make any decisions. I'm not allowed to access any donor names. I wasn't even sure what my job was or if I even had a job. Right now, I actually don't. I'm not sure what my job here is. In the board minutes, it says that I no longer have a paycheck and I'm indefinitely suspended from this organization.
Indefinitely suspended pending the results of the audit. He always leaves that part out.
5 days later, after that, on February 15th, a statement was put out by this organization, by this organization's executive director, saying, quote, James has not been removed from Project Veritas.
Which was true.
5 days after they removed me from Project Veritas.
They didn't remove you from Project Veritas.
James is the hardest working person I've ever met. Those who know him know he will not take time off unless forced to. Absent from the statement was the actions of the board to remove me from the board and remove me as CEO.
They didn't remove you from either of those
I don't know why they
positions.
omitted that part.
Because it didn't happen.
Later on the 15th, the same day, while hiking with Kennedy, PV put a statement by quote tweeting a picture of me.
You see how James, so this is totally a narcissist thing, by the way. James is not only lying about the fact because the board did not remove him from the board, they did not remove him as CEO, so he's lying about that, but then he's like, and I found out about all of this as I was hiking with Robert F. Kennedy. That's a narcissist thing, by the way. I was just out hiking with Kennedy after those mean people had removed me from the board. When he wasn't removed from the board. That is just factually wrong. And no, DD, they did not fire him. You are repeating talking points. You're basically proving you're an NPC that can't think for yourself. Congratulations. Guys, being suspended without pay is not the same thing as being fired. And anyone who tells you, pending the results of an audit, and that's not the same thing as being fired. And anyone who tells you that it is lying to you and is either not smart enough to understand the difference, or they are purposefully trying to sell you James O'Keefe's narrative because they are sucking James O'Keefe's dick, figuratively, of course. Well, no, Dee Dee, I'm not going to tell Robert that. I'm just going to block you. Goodbye. Goodbye. No time for stupid people on this channel, guys. Sorry.
With him, saying there is nothing better than enjoying a well-deserved vacation. That tweet failed to mention that by then I had been removed from the board and indefinitely suspended as CEO. Why didn't they put that part in?
Because it didn't happen, James.
This is where things get really messed up. A few days later, an officer sent an email to the board with bizarre hyperbole and innuendo about certain expenses related to our business needs. These included, and you can't make this up.
Guys, there's in every single employee manual on the planet, there are sections about being suspended without pay. For any company that's doing anything correctly. I mean, maybe companies that are just starting and they don't have the proper like HR framework in place, they don't have that. But to anyone that says that you can't, like being suspended without pay is the same thing as being fired, it's provably not, because I guarantee you that Project Veritas has paperwork in their employee manual and in their HR office about the process of being suspended without pay and when that happens and why that happens. And if Robert Barnes is saying that's the same thing as being fired, he is a fucking liar, just like Viva D'Angelo. They're lying. They're lying to cover for James. That's what it is. And if you can't see through it, I don't know what to tell you. Look in your employee manual right now for whatever organization you work for. Go look through your employee manual right now and look for sections about being suspended with pay, being suspended without pay, how that all works, being put on leave. I guarantee you it is all in the employee manual.
That Project Veritas paid for James O'Keefe's down payment of his wedding. I got a chuckle out of this. I'm not married. I've never been married. I do hope to get married one day. In fact, I got married to you in Oklahoma, but that was pretend.
James was engaged, and the engagement was called off. So James is trying to make it seem, I don't know why they're saying that, I paid for a wedding venue with Project Veritas money. I don't know why they would ever say that. I've never been married. James was engaged, and the engagement was called off after he had put down the $12,000 deposit on the reception venue. And then instead of just eating the cost of that reception venue, James decided to move the Project Veritas in holiday party to his wedding reception venue so that he could get Project Veritas to pay for it. That's what happened. But instead, James is just pretending. I don't know why people would say I was getting married. I've never been married. They're just making this shit up. No, they're not making it up, James. You were engaged, and the engagement got called off.
That was fun. Everyone enjoyed it. We rented a charter bus. We all went down. Everyone enjoyed that musical.
Constructive termination is not a thing, Peter. That's
I'm not
real.
married, but the truth of the expense, the $12,000, was that it was a payment for our annual Project Veritas Christmas party.
After it was your wedding venue.
You guys were there. Some of you brought your spouses. The officer lied by omission, excluding the purpose of paying the $12,000 for the wedding venue.
James is literally lying by omission right now by not admitting that he was engaged, had a $12,000 deposit down on a wedding venue, the engagement got called off. James moved the holiday party to the wedding venue so that he didn't. James is the one that's lying by omission here, guys.
It looked like Project Veritas was reimbursing me for a wedding venue. Why would the officer lie like that?
Why would you lie like that, James?
There were also, again, bizarre complaints, and this is where you come in, Asha, about taking too many trips to too many meetings over the course of a year. I think there were like 305 cars I had taken to meetings and donors and journalism assignments, including all the, quote, black cars taken from airports to various meetings. I have a copy of that, so you don't have to take my word for it.
This is a deflection.
The officer stated to the board, this is on February 13th this week, that we should do things such as, quote, reschedule meetings. And the IRS would prefer Zoom meetings over in-person meetings. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. My lawyers got a real laugh out of that one over the last couple of days.
Vision, it was not indefinite suspension. The literal receipts that James provided said suspension, indefinite suspension, pending the results of the audit. James saying, I was suspended indefinitely and it had no end in sight is not the truth. Indefinite suspension pending the results of the audit, meaning that the suspension would have ended one way or the other after the audit.
And again, I have a copy of these. You can read them for yourselves. The wedding, there's a line item here. It omits the purpose of the expense. It was for a project. You were there. You were dressed in your amazing Christmas clothes. I remember it was beautiful. It was like Christmas PJ blazer thing you had on?
That was that one.
You were there. It wasn't a wedding. It wasn't a wedding.
Thanks for bringing the outfit.
It was a great outfit. I remember, that was what I remember from that. And we sang "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning," but it wasn't, I didn't get married. It was a Project Veritas Christmas party. Our Christmas party this year cost about twice as much. That one was about $12,000. Okay. And I have the line item here that sent to the board about the black cars. Too many car trips.
So people in the chat are asking now, well, what's a man got to do? He's got to work. Well, when you are a member of a board of directors, what you don't do is go and start a competing organization. James could have done other work, guys. James could have done other work. Well, this whole thing with Project Veritas was working itself out. And I would bet you that if James hadn't started a competing organization with Project Veritas, while he was still employed by Project Veritas and still on the board of directors of Project Veritas, they wouldn't have said boo about it. James could have gone on the conference speaking circuit. That probably would have been fine. James could have written another book. That probably would have been fine. James probably could have done any number of things to make a metric ton of money. And Project Veritas probably wouldn't have cared at all. The problem is that James didn't do any of those things. James didn't go on a book tour. James didn't go on a speaking tour. He didn't spend his time writing another book. He didn't do any of those things. What he chose to do was start a competing organization with Project Veritas while he was still on the board of directors with Project Veritas. That's not allowed. Facts don't care about your feelings, guys. That is not allowed.
And by the way, Zoom meetings over in-person meetings is not how you raise money and not how you conduct your journalism. It's hard to get the content over a screen. Ask our journalist if that works to produce a story. In fact, I would maybe ask you guys to ask these guys how you're supposed to do your jobs without taking, quote, black cars around. I don't know how I can do my job here.
He's
If I
deflecting
can't
again.
transport myself around the United States. It actually doesn't make any actual sense, does it? None of this makes any sense. And why is it all happening right now?
That is another instance. That's like 4 or 5 times in this one video where James is like, the only reason this is happening right now is because of Pfizer. That's the only reason that it's happening. He keeps saying that over and over and over and over again. That is deliberate.
Those are the questions I have. I don't have answers. You guys are journalists. Maybe you can go find the answers. I don't know. After this series of events, I wrote a letter to the board on February 16th with the proposal. Many of you have not seen this, but this is what I sent to them, which I guess they haven't shared this with you, but I'm going to share it with you now. With a proposal that the board members resign by the end of this past week. We're now past that point, or I'll be forced to walk away. And
why would James be forced to walk away on February 16th when he said on Tim Pool last night that he was fired on February 10th? Again, guys, all you need to figure this out is a calendar. The dates do not add up. Because James has changed the story 19 ways from Sunday, ignoring evidence that contradicts what he said. There is no reason that he would have had to send a letter demanding the entire board resign, or he was going to walk away from the company if the board had already fired him on February 10th.
This is what I wrote. Dear board, and I'm not going to provide the whole thing, but I'll provide the meat and potatoes. Over the last 2 weeks, I've carefully followed the board's directive to take a vacation and avoid contacting donors. Of course, donors called me. My phone was being lit up with thousands of phone calls. One donor even, I think, posted a video. She was upset about how she was portrayed in the grievances. Remmers was her name. She posted a video saying the grievance was a total lie. My understanding is one of the officers of this organization responded to that by calling the donor a liar. The officer wasn't there. Why would the officer call the woman with the sole authority on the matter who was there? Why would he call her a liar? I don't know the answer to that question. Your actions over the same period to undermine Veritas and its future, including airing confidential employment matters publicly, has broken trust. I cannot in good conscience return to such a mismanaged organization. I have not responded privately or publicly because there is no rational, appropriate response for the emotional circus that has been created by your actions. I expect the board to resign by the end of the week. Project Veritas, including any employees who choose to stay, will go on under my leadership with newly appointed professional board members and officers prepared to exercise their duty of care and duty of loyalty.
He has just insinuated that the board that took him out of control and told him no, they only did that because they're not professional. And if all of you just resign, by the way, remember, this was James O'Keefe's hand-picked board. Hand-picked board. And now he's saying all of those mean people that are bought off and paid for by Pfizer, they were just not professional, and that's why they removed me and suspended me, and that's why they told me no. And I need all of them to resign, and that's the only, and then we will move forward under my leadership with professional board members.
To the organization. That's what a board does. They exercise duty of loyalty and duty of care. What they shouldn't do is try to destroy an organization. That's not what a board member does. I will return to work on Monday, that's today, and work with the remaining team to go forward with our mission. Short of this action, I cannot...
And remember, guys, when this video was released, James had already formed his competing group. James had already formed OMG. When James did this big speech and recorded all of this for public consumption, he had already formed OMG. He already knew that he was leaving. He already knew that he was not exercising his duty as a board member of Project Veritas. He already knew that he had broken his employment agreement with Project Veritas.
In good faith, return to the employment of an organization with leaders who are attacking me personally, making false and unsupported claims of improper management of resources about weddings and black cars, improperly airing employment issues related to me and others at Project Veritas. I did not leak that document, and I would swear to it under oath.
He got someone to leak it.
It probably wasn't the best idea to march employees into a boardroom. That's never happened in any boardroom in the history of boardrooms. And that's one of the reasons why our donors are so upset.
Okay.
That doesn't happen.
It does. Actually.
Ruining our reputation in front of supporters and donors and leaking confidential information and fabricating stories. One of our ethical rules is we don't lie to our audience. I've never lied to our audience in 13 years. But I was stripped of all decision-making last week. And you guys put out a statement lying to your audience. And there's nothing I could do about it.
You're the one lying, James.
Because I was stripped of all my decision-making. I was removed from CEO.
The decision-making that James was stripped of, which he literally showed you the receipt earlier, was hiring and firing employees, company credit card, and accessing the donor list. So again, James just lied. In the literal sentence where James is saying, I don't lie to people, only you guys lie to people. I don't lie to people, I would never do that. He lied in the same sentence, guys.
I was asked to be gone until the 20th. It is now the 20th. I asked the board to resign for their conduct.
It is the 20th, and you formed OMG Media Group on the 17th, James.
And they did not. So currently, I have no job at Project Veritas. I have no position here based upon what the board has done.
That's not true.
So I'm announcing to
Not
you all
true.
that today on President's Day, I'm packing up my personal belongings here. I don't really have much in this room that belongs to me. I guess a painting, a diploma, some personal things.
Guys, packing up your personal belongings is not the same thing as resigning. James was still on the board. He was still the CEO. And he never formally resigned.
It won't fill much. Maybe it'll fill my Kia. I'm packing up my personal, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, from headquarters, and I'm
now the
intending to
tears
start
come.
anew. I don't have the answers to why they've been doing this, or why board members were going directly to employees to collect grievances on the week of our biggest story ever.
Oh, it's kind of like James is saying that this must have been related to our biggest story ever in Pfizer. There's just, again, this is like the 6th or 7th time he's done it in the course of this video. I don't know why they're doing this. But remember, it happened at the same time as Pfizer, but I just don't know why why they're doing this to me. There's no other explanation. Okay, fine, sure, okay.
Or why our board members were going to employees directly to discuss removing me from this organization, even saying I'll give you a raise if James is removed.
That's not what was said.
That might be illegal.
Why?
I don't know.
That wasn't what was said.
But why would they do it the week of our biggest story ever? But I'm confident that those reasons and motivations will come to light. To borrow an old expression, the public has a right to know.
I think they will too.
What has happened here, and why there was a concerted effort to remove me from the organization I founded the same week of our biggest story ever had. Almost done.
Thank God.
This is very difficult. And I'm filming this for the staff. You know, sorry you couldn't be physically here, but this is for internal distribution.
They leaked this to Tim Pool right after they filmed it. James just looked into the camera and lied again. They leaked this to Timcast right after they filmed it, and it was on Tim Pool's YouTube channel almost immediately. This entire video, we're watching it from Tim Pool's YouTube channel. Tim Pool uploaded this entire video without commentary right after they filmed it. But no, this is for internal distribution only, and we're just filming it for all of those poor staff members who couldn't be here to have me grace them with my presence and my big 40-minute going away speech.
My dear team, I do love many of you. I never said it, those words, but I'll say it now. I want to go back to the beginning of what I said and express how important so many of you are to me. How I still believe we have a long...
James is about to do the ask for employees, being like, come with me, employees. Leave Project Veritas. Come with me. Join me.
Long and bright future together somehow, some way. And to share
Hang on, Jenny's getting inky with it, sent in a super chat. Jenny, I'm sorry I can't display it on the stream, but I'm having issues with the chat doing that right now. Jenny says, 30 minutes behind, wonder if Project Veritas requested a jury trial for similar reasons as Depp versus Heard as a means of making it publicly available. I would venture a guess, based on the conversations that I had this morning, that is exactly why they requested the jury trial. In fact, it was pretty much told to me in no uncertain terms that they were not going to allow James to weasel his way out of this. They want the jury trial. They want people to see what actually happened. They want to show the receipts. There is not going to be a settlement, guys. I mean, I could be wrong. I really could be. This is just me positing. But based on what I heard, I don't think that's going to be the case. So we're all going to get to see. And we're all going to see the receipts. And I don't think it's going to work out well for James. I really don't.
My profound appreciation for many of you. When I left the office, and this is where I'm going to get emotional, so please forgive me. When I left the office on February 6th, after being stripped of all my authority,
he wasn't
I
stripped
saw
of
my
authority
father
on
and gave
February
him a hug.
6th. That wasn't true. Lie,
realizing just how
lie,
honest and
lie.
real of a man he is.
And now James has just told a lie because he was not stripped of all his authority on February 6th. That did not happen until February 10th. So he's lied again. And now we're going to go into another sob story about James O'Keefe's tough journey to build Project Veritas, which I'm not doubting is true, but that's not the reason why he's telling it.
Both my parents are as genuine and down to earth as a son could ever have. It's true, you never really know someone until you go through hell with them. You see, back in the carriage house 13 years ago, the feds would come to my home to make sure that I was inside my house, administering random drug tests and rifling through my expenses to make sure I wasn't lying about the strawberry ice cream I bought at 7-Eleven. And I didn't have any money, but they went through my debit card statements and tried to get me to sign things to prove I wasn't lying. There were federal agents showing up at my parents' house. There were no donors. There were no supporters. And I was not trending on Twitter. My father went through this hell with me and stood up to those bullies on the front lawn and told them to stop harassing our family. And at that point, that's all I had was him. I was otherwise completely alone. I will never forget that. Now the good news, we're no longer alone. We have millions of Americans who also know who I am.
Guys, I know a lot of us are feeling bad for James O'Keefe right now, and believe me, I get it. He wants you to feel bad for him. He does not have these emotions, guys. He doesn't have these emotions. This is not real. This is theater. He will never feel bad for you. If you were in this situation and you had this story, he wouldn't feel anything towards you at all.
In fact, sorry. In fact, you have, and we all have watched their overwhelming support. They see the truth. They know who I am. I also know many of you know who I am, and you know what's right, right? You know, you're people of principle here, people in this room, and this now may be your moment of truth. One of you called me from a closet the day of the 7th after I was suspended.
He wasn't suspended on the 7th. That's a lie. That's not true. That's a lie. He just lied again. Lie, James.
I never heard that tone before. I told you it was going to be okay. You were afraid of what was happening here. You said, this is really hard. This is really hard to take. I can't take this anymore. I told you that I struggled alongside you, although I wasn't physically there. I told you that I loved you. A number of us told each other that we loved one another. It was the first time I've shared that sentiment with a colleague. It was a very real moment,
That's not real.
A very beautiful moment, a touching moment where we were bound together. Many of us were really bound together in that moment, and I was grateful for that. I recognize just how honest and real many of you are in your souls, that you are amazing people. We have some really amazing people here, with men with brass balls and women with the courage of a lion. And it really, what I drew from this experience is the gratitude that I have, you know, for so many of you. And as I was going through this horrible pain where I lost 8 pounds and couldn't sleep for 5 days. I was actually overcome with this amazing gratitude. True story. I was really feeling it, and I'm grateful for that, because I've experienced something I never have, because I saw the goodness in many of you that I did not previously see. So I amend the statement that I made in the beginning of this. The statement I made before was Veritas will never be defeated from the outside. It'll only be defeated from the inside. That's actually not true. No, the only way to defeat us is if they take our spirit. And from the looks of things, many of us remain completely undefeated and unbroken. So our mission continues on. I'm not done. The mission
Come
will
with me,
perhaps
staff.
take on a new name,
Come with me, staff.
and it may be no longer called Veritas.
Come with me.
Project Veritas.
Don't stay
I'll need a bunch
here.
of people
I'll need a bunch of
around me.
people around me.
And I'll make sure you know how to find me. And I'll quote when you invited me to New York City and did that little stand-up. How fitting that from Shakespeare, quote, "And this story shall the good man teach his son. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers and sisters." So with that, I'm going to collect my things. I'm going to load them into my car. And I hope to see some of you soon. That's it.
He did not resign in the video. Collecting his things and loading them into the car did not remove him from the board of directors. It did not remove him as CEO. And Project Veritas, when they go to trial, are going to be able to explicitly show that he was not removed from the organization until May 15th. He was removed from the board on April 24th. He was removed from the organization on May 15th. So it is what it is, guys. And again, I really want to make sure this is clear. I'm not personally happy about this. I idolize James O'Keefe and what he did. It doesn't give me any great pleasure to talk about this, but I think we need to talk about it because Project Veritas employees are still working. Project Veritas employees are still covering news right now. Project Veritas employees are still trying to do their job, and they're being constantly harassed and harangued by James O'Keefe's smear campaign. And I know what that's like, guys. I know what that's like to try to keep your head down and to try to be doing good work and to try to focus and to constantly being harassed and harangued by a smear campaign that has run by a narcissist that has no basis in reality at all. It sucks. It sucks really, really, really badly. And I just don't know what to say. If you are going to support James O'Keefe in this, in smearing Project Veritas, when he could have just gone on and left and done things the correct way, he didn't have to start a competing media group with Project Veritas when he was still a member of the board of directors of Project Veritas. He could have done any number of other things. He could have formally resigned. He could have worked out some sort of deal. He could have done any number of things to exit the organization in a more productive way than he did. He didn't have to go on a media tour lying and saying Project Veritas is bought and paid for by Pfizer and that's the only reason that they did any of this when there's no evidence of that. If you are one of the people that's like, oh, I'm never supporting Project Veritas again, you are a moron. I'm sorry. I know that hurts your feelings. But Project Veritas is still focusing on doing work and exposing things that needs to be exposed. And James O'Keefe is doing every single thing that he can to stop them because he believes that the only way that he will be successful is by destroying Project Veritas. And then he blames it on Project Veritas trying to destroy him when he is the one that has been running the smear campaign against them from the very beginning. If James O'Keefe had not done what he did, had not handled the situation in the way that he did, Project Veritas probably would never have sued him. But James O'Keefe left Project Veritas no choice. This isn't entirely the result of his actions. I'm sorry. And I know people don't want to hear it, and I know they don't like it, and I wish it were different, but it's not. So, are you in this for entertainment? Or are you in this to actually get stuff accomplished? Because if all you want is to be entertained, Viva D'Angelo and Robert Barnes and Tim Pool and James O'Keefe and Benny Johnson and Jack Posobiec, they will lie to you every single day of the week and take your money for the privilege of lying to you, and they will entertain you while they're doing it, I promise. But if you actually want to accomplish things, you have to stay hinged into reality. Vision says, can he say that was his resignation video? No, Vision, he can't. No. There is no reality in which that was a resignation video. Also, you generally have to put resignation in writing. All idols have clay feet, guys. Sometimes the people that we idolize, oftentimes the people that we idolize, turn out not to be what we think they are. And it's just the way it goes. And I'm sorry. But I'm losing my voice because I've been streaming for 3 hours and 21 minutes, so I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to go hang out and relax a little while and hopefully think about things that are not betrayal and narcissism and all these things. But I really do hope that Project Veritas follows the advice that I gave them and reaches out to HG Tutor. I really do. I think he could actually really help them right now. And that would be interesting. That would be interesting to see how he advises them. And I'm waiting for the trial. I want to see the trial. I would stream the shit out of that trial every day of the week. And I think all the receipts are going to come out. And I think it's going to be very clear. So guys, I will see you back on this channel at 5 p.m. tomorrow with hopefully much brighter news, like a woke training of some sort. A dystopian training, if you will. But let's just go take some time to relax. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon.